Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to be here with all of you tonight. Let's have yet another great late night chat.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're having yet another great late night conversation. The circumstances in the world are certainly not what we want them to be, and we're in a bad situation. But at the same time, we have to just continue to advocate for what is right. And I'm going to give you an update on different aspects of the crisis and the political situation in America from multiple different angles. So we're going to follow our usual format tonight, which is, first I'll give my opening remarks. Then from there, we'll do the roll call and I'll call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I'll answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if you have something you'd like me to talk about in the second half of the show, you can send me a Rumble rant on Rumble. You can cash at me at CalebMoppin22, but the best way to send questions is buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/CalebMoppin. Best way to send questions. If anyone wants to have me on their show, have them send me an email. My email is CalebMoppin@gmail.com, all one word, I actually did a show I'd never been on today before. I can tell you all about that. That'll be coming up. But anyhow, in terms of announcements, the Center for Political Innovation has a lot in the works. We had a really big meeting today. We had a very big agenda. We went over many, many different points, so if you'd like to get involved, we have some important anti-war activities, important anti-imperialist initiatives we're engaging in, outreach. I mean, a lot of exciting things are happening. If you'd like to get involved, join the Center for Political Innovation, become a member. That would be great. So get involved in CPI, join the Center for Political Innovation. That's the organization that I'm part of. That's the organization that's behind all the great anti-imperialist activism going on in this country. We know what this country needs, which is a real anti-imperialist movement. So on that note, as I said before, we'll be following the normal format for the show. As always, first I'll give my opening remarks, then we'll do the roll call. And then from there, I'll answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So join CPI if you'd like to get involved in our activities. Send Rumble rants, CalebMoppin22 on Cash App, or buy me a coffee if you have something you'd like me to talk about in the second half of the show. And if you're watching this tomorrow or the next day, I take, buy me a coffee is open anytime. So if you send it later, I can do it on the next stream. That's how I've been doing it. People have been sending their buy me a coffees the next day or whatever. I just do it on the next stream. And I've been streaming quite a lot lately. So there we go. So tonight I wanted to open with a story that we touched on earlier this week. I think people saw the video of Brian McGinnis. Brian McGinnis. Do people know the name Brian McGinnis? So Brian McGinnis is, candidate for for Congress, right? For the U.S. Senate, for the U.S. Senate in North Carolina. He's running for the U.S. Congress in North Carolina. He is a member of the Green Party. He's not a member of any of the two major parties. He's a former U.S. Marine, and still he's considered a Marine. I guess you're not a former Marine, you're a Marine, right? And he is opposed to U.S. support for Israel, and he is opposed to bombing Iran. And so earlier this week, he went to Capitol Hill and he disrupted a congressional proceeding. And we showed the video of what happened at that congressional proceeding. We showed the video on this channel, but a lot has happened since then. So I'm going to give you a follow-up. So this is what he said before he disrupted the congressional proceeding.
Hey guys, I'm here in DC trying to speak out against the Senate and ask them why they're going to send our men and women to harm's way when our elected officials said that there would be no war. Anybody who feels disillusioned and betrayed by our government, you're not alone. Join us in demanding accountability for this betrayal. Free Palestine, free America. Let's go.
Yeah, so that was how he kind of announced himself. And then the video that many people have probably already seen, this is what happened when he got into the congressional committee hearing and disrupted it.
To name that shows your exemptness as leaders. This is wrong. No. And nobody wants to fight for Israel.
A reminder to all our
Commandant, please stand up as a Marine and stand up for America. No one wants to fight for Israel. No one wants to fight for Israel.
His hand. Oh, his hand.
Sir. Let go of your hand. Let go of the door. Let go of the door. The senator broke his hand. A sitting U.S. senator just broke the hand of a Marine. Sir. Control your Senate. We're stuck in the door. Okay, sir. A U.S. senator just broke the hand of a Marine. Hand's stuck. A U.S.
Yeah. So, as you can see, it got a little rough in the proceeding. And he was dragged out. In the process of being dragged out, his hand was broken. Also, something odd happened, which was a member of the U.S. Senate got up and was roughing him up along with the police, which was very unprofessional behavior on the part of a U.S. senator. And it's also not standard security procedure. I mean, the first thing I'm sure they tell them in their Secret Service training, their security training, let the cops handle this. Let the Secret Service agents, let the cops handle this. Don't go and rough up a protester or fight somebody yourself if you're an elected official. It's not what you're supposed to do. So looks like this U.S. senator there who helped, just jumped into the scuffle. I mean, it wasn't enough to have 3 or 4 cops on top of him. Right, was very, very unprofessional. But so here's what happened next. Now, usually if somebody gets up and yells in a congressional proceeding, they get arrested. End of story, right? And Brian McGinnis got up and yelled, and they violently removed him. And as you can see, he was injured during that time. And usually they often don't even take you to jail. They just remove you from the building. In this case, they did take him to the hospital and to the jail and to the hospital, but they would not let him speak to his family. They would not let him speak to his lawyer. And they kept moving him from jail to jail and from hospital to hospital. And his family didn't know where he was, couldn't locate him. His lawyers couldn't locate him and find out where he was. It was very, very frightening. And we had a number of people speaking up and saying they've disappeared this guy. No one knows where they've taken him, right? If someone's arrested, there's a record of where they keep them. In his case, they specifically vanished him, made him disappear, completely horrifying. And there was a whole lot of outrage all over social media. People like, where is he? Why can't his family speak to him? Why can't his attorney speak to him? There was a lot of outrage about it. And it looked like they had vanished him. Right. They have these laws that are completely unconstitutional on the books. Started with Bush, where they declare you an enemy combatant. and they can hold you without charges. All the people in Guantanamo Bay, right? They're not charged with any crime, and they're being held without charges as enemy combatants, right? And this is a completely illegal thing. And then Obama continued this with his extraordinary rendition law, which again, this all violates the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution says you can't hold somebody unless they're charged with a crime. Habeas corpus. The Patriot Act was what Bush did. And then, Obama continued it with the extraordinary rendition law, allowing for indefinite detentions. And there's a whole lot of this, right? You can go back to during the Second World War. I mean, habeas corpus doesn't exist during war, right? So during the Second World War, you had Japanese internment. After the Second World War, they passed the McCarran Internal Security Act of 1951 that would have allowed the U.S. government to round up a list of 2 million people they considered subversives if a national state of emergency was declared. The McCarran Internal Security Act was a concentration camp law that was passed during the McCarthy period. Eventually, the courts overturned it. So, this was pretty frightening that not only was this guy roughed up pretty badly, it looks like they broke his arm. But on top of that, when they took him to jail, they just vanished him. And stuff like this has started to happen, right? For example, in Homan Square in Chicago, I don't know if people remember the case of Homan Square. Homan Square, it's a jail basically in Chicago that was being used as what they called a black site by the U.S. Department or the Chicago Police Department, where before they would take you to jail, they would take you to Homan Square and torture you. You look at the details of the Homan Square scandal, it's pretty horrendous. It's pretty awful what they were doing at Homan Square. And it was supposedly to fight gangs in Chicago or something like that. But before they would take people to jail, they would disappear them to this place called Homan Square, where there'd be no record of them being there. And they actually did it to 3 protesters in 2012. I was in Chicago in 2012 to protest the NATO summit in Chicago. It was back in the Occupy Wall Street days. And I was there. And while I was there, they raided an anarchist house, one of the anarchist squats or houses or whatever. And they took 3 activists to Homan Square, and disappeared them before eventually, taking them to jail. So, people being disappeared is something that the American government has been doing, right, with Guantanamo Bay and all this. So it looked like they had disappeared Brian McGinnis for standing up in the congressional proceeding and opposing this war. However, today, finally, he was released. There was a huge amount of outrage, people wanting to know where Brian McGinnis was, and they finally did release him, which is a huge victory. And thank goodness, if there had not been a huge social media blow up about the incident, we might never have heard from him again. Right. This is getting to be some Augusto Pinochet kind of stuff, right? This is like, what the old, the South Korean government under Park Chung-hee would do, where they just grab people and then maybe in a couple of weeks we'll find their body in the street to find out if they're dead. This is some evil shit, but apparently there was enough outrage on social media. He was released. This is the video of him finally reuniting with his family after having his arm broken and being held and moved from jail to hospital, not being able to see a lawyer, not being able to communicate with anybody.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was very relieving that he finally was released. I will note, so his wife is a Muslim, right? Is an Arab American, right? I believe of Palestinian descent. And one of the most disgusting things is after the clip of him, a U.S. Marine, saying no one wants to fight for Israel, and then getting very badly injured in the halls of Congress. After that went viral, I saw all these pro-Trump people that are supporting the war and supporting Trump sharing the video of him, sharing pictures of him. He's married to a Muslim. Well, so what? So what? I mean, does that make his military service not real? Does that make his political message illegitimate? Does that mean it's okay to break his arm? So what? And that a lot of the support for this war, right? The overwhelming majority of people who voted for Trump voted for him because he said he was going to stop the wars. Tucker Carlson was on the campaign trail with him. Marjorie Taylor Greene campaigned for him. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard was on the stage, campaigning for him. The overwhelming majority of people who voted for Trump wanted to stop the wars. But among those who still support these wars and support Trump, hatred for Muslims and the idea that all Muslims are terrorists and all Muslims are extremists is a big part of what they believe, right? That all Muslims are exactly the same and they're all terrorists. And that's why these wars, it's okay, right? That's a big part of it. And the fact that they just had a picture of him and he happens to have a Muslim wife, that's proof that, oh, it's okay for them to terrorize him. I mean, that was the argument. But anyway, he gave this statement after he got out of jail.
Took an oath to defend this country from enemies, foreign and domestic, and we're facing domestic enemies right now. That's right. Our leaders are in cahoots with Israel, and they're leading America into unprovoked wars, and that's not right. And we got to stand up against it. The American citizens have to say no to our government's choices, and we don't want war. So that's why we're speaking up. And free Palestine, and Palestine is our strength. The Palestinians are suffering far worse than any of this. Right. So it gives us unending strength. So here we are.
Free Palestine. Free Palestine.
Yeah. So, we salute Brian McGinnis. This guy is definitely a hero. This is the kind of person that we need now more than ever. He's somebody, a former U.S. Marine. He's somebody that you can't question the patriotism of him and say he's un-American or unpatriotic. And he's someone who can speak to the most important constituency in America right now, which is the dissident MAGA community, the people who voted for Trump to stop the wars and are angry with him and continue to oppose these wars even when Trump betrayed that promise. They're loyal to opposing the wars. They're not loyal to Trump's personality. So I really hope that his campaign is successful in South Carolina. I look up to Brian McGinnis a great deal. I think what he did was tremendous. And, my hat off to Brian McGinnis. And I hope. Now, I understand they're trying to charge him with assault on the Capitol Police, which, I didn't see any assault in that video. I saw them dragging him out. I saw him resisting arrest, perhaps. I don't know the legal definition of that, especially not in a federal territory like Washington, D.C., but I did not see any assault. I didn't see an assault. I saw them assault him, right, and break his hand. And a member of Congress jump up and assault him, a U.S. senator assault him. So if there needs to be more of a legal defense of him, we should certainly get involved in that as the Center for Political Innovation. If they try to lock him up for a long time for getting up and yelling, right? If they, if they try to, go after him viciously with legal charges, right? If they don't just drop the charges or negotiate the charges down to nothing, if there ends up being a legal case against it, we will have to get involved in that, because this is the kind of guy that America needs now more than ever. We look up to Brian McGinnis. We salute you, Brian McGinnis. We wish you the best of luck in everything that you do. And it was very heroic of you to do that. And we hope to see you in the streets protesting this evil war. Now, Candace Owens is another figure. Now, Candace Owens is a fascinating figure. So she comes out of Turning Points USA, Daily Wire. She was just a normal African-American conservative, but she had the courage to oppose Israel. And she came out of just like the mainstream Black Republican circles, right? And she interviewed Norman Finkelstein, and she refused to obey the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, that crowd, and she wouldn't do that, and they came after her. So she has gone all against this war. And I want to show you. So Candace Owens, we're going to talk. I mean, she has gone in a very, very interesting direction, but she made a tweet. And before I play this, I will, this is the tweet that she made. right, that has gotten everybody really fired up at her. All the right wing are furious with her. It says, do not join or remain in the United States military. Trump has betrayed America and expects you to die for Israel. There is no honor in being led by dishonorable men to your death. Now, that's what she said. Bold words, very, very bold words, but important words, right? And it's important that somebody as prominent as Candace Owens is saying this. I don't agree with a lot of what Candace Owens says, especially when it comes to world history. I mean, she says all kinds of things about the history of the Soviet Union that I don't agree with, and all kinds of. And I hope that someday she and I can sit down and talk about it. But that said, the fact that a prominent voice is not only opposing this war, but urging soldiers not to participate in this war, that is tremendous. And so she made this tweet. There was thunderous condemnation of Candace Owens for making this statement, and she doubled down. And this is her doubling down.
I want war with all of you. Okay, all of you. And there's a reason. I'm going to get to that reason in a little bit, but I want war with all of you. So write your articles, issue your statements, email the White House, reach out for comment, okay? Say whatever it is you want to say about me. I want war with all of you. Because I know this isn't right. And there is no way you are going to convince me and the rest of the world that all of this is normal.
Yeah. And there you go. So not only did she say what she said, I stand by it and bring it on, basically. I know that I'm right around this. I know that we shouldn't be fighting with Iran right now. And she doubled down. Absolutely tremendous. Another thing is that Megyn Kelly opposes the war. And Megyn Kelly, who, she's not where Candace Owens is at, and she's further. I would say I'm closer to Candace Owens than Megyn Kelly. But Megyn Kelly commented on how there's this pressure to cancel Candace Owens and how she told Tucker Carlson she's just not going along with it. This is very interesting as well.
One more voice who will say something nasty about Candace, she could finally be controlled. How well has that worked so far? But again, the instinct is to stop her speech. Stop it. Well, I have no desire to, and I have no power to. And for that, I was called a coward by Ben Shapiro. They want me really, really badly to condemn Candace Owens. And I'm sorry to break it to them, but I am responsible for what I say. I am not Candace Owens's policeman.
Yeah. And that is really, really important because the way social media works is they launch campaigns against people. I've been the victim of this, where they just lie about you. They take things out of context. They distort what you're doing. And then they put pressure on everybody has to denounce you or else they get canceled too. And Megyn Kelly, who's also quite prominent among conservatives, is refusing to do it. And she's saying, no, I don't necessarily agree with everything Candace says, but no, I'm not playing this game of where I have to denounce everybody. I'm not going to do it. That's really, 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 really important. It's very, 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 very important. And I think it's really, really tremendous. Now, one topic that Candace Owens has talked endlessly about is the killing of Charlie Kirk. And she's really she believes Israel killed Charlie Kirk. And I'm not convinced necessarily that that's true. It could be. I really don't know. I believe that the killing of Charlie Kirk, the social media response to it, all of it was part of an effort to foment political violence in America and bring on the years of lead. But an argument in favor of the fact that Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel. This clip just surfaced of Charlie Kirk's, this is before his death, obviously. He's not saying this from the grave. This is Charlie Kirk saying why he thought war with Iran was not a good idea. Watch.
Iran does have a conventional military. They are a proud and they are a big country. Possible case scenario is Iran says, okay, you humiliated us. You killed all of our leaders. We're going to go make this a regional mess and try to get as many people involved as possible. They're going to go after Americans. They're going to go after Saudis. They're going to go after everybody imaginable just to create a big mess and to try to draw the world into it. Because understand, the Iranian people are widely respected and not necessarily are always in sync with leadership. But if and when the people of Iran feel like Persia is being defaced and humiliated and disrespected. We don't know where that is going to go. And that's my final reason why I am always skeptical of military intervention. And when a lot of the sometimes warmongering wing gets too excited, you don't know, actually. You need to have a lot of humility.
Yeah. So it sounds like Charlie Kirk, to whatever degree, kind of like Candace Owens, was somebody in the mainstream of the conservative camp that just had common sense when it came to the war with Iran. And so with that clip going around, I mean, obviously that's not the only thing that Charlie Kirk ever said about Iran. Certainly not the only thing he ever said about Israel and Muslims and all of that. But it sounds like he had, to some degree or other, an ounce of common sense. And if this war had happened and Charlie Kirk had been alive to tell conservatives not to support it, who knows what the case could be. So the idea that somehow Israel detected that Charlie Kirk was against the war and killed him as part of preparing for this war, I think a strong argument could be made. I can see that, you know, possibly being the case. But here is a clip of Candace Owens talking about the war. It's a longer clip. It's about 5 minutes of Candace Owens talking about the war with somebody named Ian Carroll and kind of giving her perspective. She has kind of a conspiratorial perspective. I believe she is a traditionalist Roman Catholic. You know, she argues that there's some kind of Zionist conspiracy, etc. So this is her talking about the war and saying a lot of true things.
Very planned war with Iran. What happened first was a very obvious infiltration of a propaganda war where they just started accusing everyone of anti-Semitism, right? I was a victim of this. I think what they were doing was they were kind of priming the environment for nobody can question anything a Jewish person says or does. Israel.
Yeah, I was a victim of that too, right? And I'm come out of the left. And Vosh has whole videos where I'm criticizing capitalism, and he stops the clip and says, he means the Jews, right? That was BreadTube's whole thing. You couldn't say imperialism. You couldn't say finance capital. You couldn't say banker. That's code for Jew, right? That was their whole thing. That was a big part of the BreadTube sphere, was that anyone who criticizes capitalism, if you criticize the military industrial complex, you criticize the Pentagon, that means Jew. I mean, I can dig up some clips. I might want to dig up some clips of that because, you know, that was a big part of the smear campaign against this YouTube channel, right? And BreadTube serves imperialism. I talk about that. They basically said, you're not allowed to criticize U.S. imperialism because if you criticize it, that makes you somehow anti-Semitic.
Cease to exist, whatever it is, because they didn't want us to prod this narrative of us needing to come to Israel's aid yet again. We had this relationship where we assumed the media was telling us the truth. Yeah. But Generation 9/11 has grown up. We have seen the fruits of these wars, and we are asking the question why it seems that the only country that benefits from all of this, and they openly say it, these conflicts, is Israel. They constantly are benefiting from these wars. They don't have the bodies to fight them, and they are going to draft American sons and daughters. He's already giving that rhetoric that we must get involved. We obviously know how this works with Israel. We have a long history and relationship with Israel. Look at this. Who wants to do a false flag, it says. And
that's a fair concern, right? Right now, the U.S. public is not on board with this. So is there going to possibly be a false flag attack or something to drum up public support? That's a real concern.
The question, to drag U.S. into war with Iran, you will A, attack a U.S. ship, C, assassinate a U.S. official, B, attack a U.S. base, or D, conduct terrorism on U.S. soil.
It's missing option E, all of the above, which is
yeah, I mean, the USS Liberty, right? Look into that incident, right? This is a U.S. ship that was in the Middle East in 1967, and Israel attacked it. And repeatedly, the ship, you know, called out to Israel, said, this is an American ship, you know, and Israel just kept attacking. It kept attacking. 33 U.S. sailors were killed. And Israel, you know, they said, whoops, you know, and they said it was an accident. But if you look at the records, it wasn't an accident. And it appeared that Israel was hoping that they could blame the attack on the Arab countries to get the United States involved in the 1967 war. And that looks like what was going on, is that, you know, a full-scale attack was launched where Israel killed 33 U.S. sailors, and many times they were waving an American flag, trying to make clear, we're not your enemy, Israel, we're on your side here. And Israel launched the attack hoping they could blame it on Egypt or blame it on one of the Arab countries and get the United States to enter the 1967 war on their side. So none of this is crazy, right? And I mean, they've done it before.
Concerned about, like, Israel has done many
X
false
is all
flags,
IDF bots.
many false
it's
flags,
so not
both
real.
on America and on themselves.
We have to be very careful.
Yeah, and on themselves too. And that's, if you watch, there's a movie called what is it called? It's it's a Hollywood movie promoting Israel that was made. It's called Exodus. Came out in the 1960s. It's about the founding of Israel. And in that movie, there's a clip where a ship blows up, and the Mossad did it in order to convince the Jews of Middle Eastern countries that they needed to move to Israel. And they even acknowledge it in the film. Right? It's not considered a conspiracy theory. It's just something. And it's true that Mossad blew up synagogues in Iraq to convince the Jews of Iraq that they needed to leave. They needed to move to Israel. That Mossad actually did conduct a number of false flag attacks on Jews, on Jewish people, to convince them that they needed to move to Israel. Again, not a crazy conspiracy theory. It's something that Israel admits.
Iran, and I'm going, guys, you're too obvious. Like, everything is just too obvious at this point, and you've lost the crowd, right? So even this conversation that we're having, you couldn't have it 2 years ago. The deception has become that obvious.
The whole war kicked off with, the preemptive strike from Israel.
Yeah, just to be clear, they're either attacked or they attack preemptively, but they're never wrong, right?
No, they are definitely defending themselves.
Defending
they
themselves
clearly
always.
have the
Even
right
when they
to
attack,
defend
they're
themselves.
defending themselves.
We were in the process of having negotiations and theoretically move towards peace and de-escalation. And Iran seemed to think that we were acting in good faith. And then Israel launches this attack, this preemptive strike on Iran. That's so messed up. That is beyond messed up.
Also, because we give them billions of dollars every
year.
Year.
Should be condemned. They should be cut off.
We're cutting you off financially. They're selling us crap. They're telling us, oh, it's about this. It's because you have to save these people. It's because this is happening. And in reality, it's because they are the makers of the world. Like, they are the people that want to make sure that they control the world, they control the wealth, and that they control the land. And it's very obvious that Bibi Netanyahu just happens to be satanic. He is just, you will never remove me from that understanding. He is a full-blown demon. And anybody that supports him, in my view, I am questioning your soul. I really am at this point.
I mean, at this point, the tragic beauty of it all is that it is so obvious because the propaganda, we're literally like from 1 month to the next. Oh my gosh, Hamas is using human shields. Oh no, like they're bombing our cities in Israel because our military installations are built into and underneath Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, Iran is bombing civilians. You mean like Gaza, where you bombed tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians? Like, we are just a month apart.
War is hell.
Oh my gosh, it's
war
so
is
tragic.
Hell.
Why would you ever want this?
Of course the kids have to die. War is hell.
Yeah.
They can't keep their argument straight. Now all of a sudden it's like one Israeli dies. Oh my gosh, a civilian was killed. Like, what are you guys doing? Keep your argument straight.
Israel wants greater Israel. A lot of Israel, especially like the sort of far right faction that Bibi has surrounded himself with now, they want greater Israel. They want not only all of Israel and Gaza and the West Bank, but they also want to expand into this more like, I guess I was going to say biblical, but it's more like Torah. I don't know what, like how they would even describe it, but this like religious prophecy of the greater Israel
with
project.
The red heifers. And
yes, exactly.
The
they want to destroy the temple and rebuild the Jewish temple on the Temple Mount. And they have openly spoken about that.
This is not an exaggeration. There are even patches that Israeli soldiers wear that have a map of so-called Greater Israel on it. Mike Huckabee told Tucker Carlson he would be fine with Israel taking all of the land between the Nile and the Euphrates River, like the whole Middle East. He said he'd be fine with that. And that caused a huge issue among the Middle Eastern countries, that Israel is openly expansionist. And, and there's some sick stuff going on with the red heifer and wanting to rebuild the temple and all of this stuff. I mean, this is some real stuff that that is very dark and evil. You know, and but anyway, we'll let this clip go, and I've got plenty more things to talk about.
Many people in his government have openly spoken about that in the past. So they have all this religious stuff going on, and destroying Iran is a critical destabilization to sort of like finish the job in the Middle East to get them ready for all that. And then beyond that, also destroying Iran destabilizes the entire Belt and Road Initiative of China and all of their allies. And in the same vein, just as you destabilize Iran and the Chinese trade systems, the Chinese yuan, you also are building your Western trade system with this canal. So I think there's a whole bunch of oil, geopolitics, trade, and dollar supremacy going on in the background.
And then if something happens, we don't know. It was definitely
Actually, kind of that Carroll guy. That's good that he said that, right? Usually, you know, often this kind of crowd, it's all just a big conspiracy. It's all led by the communists, of course. It's all a big communist conspiracy against Christianity. But it's good that Ian Carroll there's, you know, giving an economic analysis. I appreciate that, actually, because this does have a lot to do with the Belt and Road. People have noticed that Venezuela and Iran are two countries that sell oil to China, and that with China not being able to get oil from Venezuela or from Iran, that gives the United States way more leverage over China's economy. China still gets oil from Saudi Arabia and from America too. But if they're not able to get it from two anti-imperialist states, that hurts China.
definitely Iran. Whatever is good for us, it definitely was that. Somehow they always make a way. In every war, Israel wins. It's amazing. Even the ones they're not involved with.
In every war, Israel
through deception,
lies.
Exactly. Through deception. They get people warring with one another. We have to wake up to that and learn more about history and what they have been able to accomplish through that deception.
Well, it's understandable because we're finding out that they can't exactly win the wars without us, apparently. Because
clearly, that's the whole reason they're doing
not
this.
going so hot over there right now.
Yeah. So I thought that was great. These voices like Candace Owens are really important. They're really, really important because, again, the left is dead. The left is dead and the left is hopeless, right? I mean, any socialist communist group in America is hopeless. They couldn't even defend their own. They couldn't defend the Uhuru movement. When the government raided the homes of a group of black socialists and accused them of being Russian agents, the left couldn't even defend them. The left is hopeless, right? And, you know, I don't want to go on about that too much. I want to focus on the fact that we need to be finding people, you know, that are, you know, dissident MAGA, etc., you know, and engage them, you know. So I actually went on the podcast, The Liberty Report of the Ron Paul Institute. They had me on Thursday. The episode just aired today. If you go to the Ron Paul Liberty Report, you can find a half-hour interview they did with me about my book, The Regime Change Industry. I wrote this book. It's a compilation of articles I wrote. The Regime Change Industry, the Woke Left, Samantha Power, and the Deep State. And Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute had me on, and we talked for a half hour. I did not know Daniel McAdams lived in Hungary for a long time and studied the color revolution apparatus, the people who helped bring down the Soviet Union. And we talked a lot about the CIA's liberal wing and the color revolutions. It was a great conversation. There was kind of an issue with the sound, but it was just a technical issue. So my voice is kind of, you know, it doesn't sound exactly right, but you can understand what I'm saying. And it was a great conversation. And Daniel McAdams is a really smart guy who really understands the intelligence apparatus and how they operate. And, you know, it was really, really great. And the Ron Paul Institute, they were brave enough to have me on. In fact, it was the first episode that they've ever had of their Ron Paul Liberty Report Extra, right? Usually their Ron Paul Liberty Report is just Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul, but this time they are having the Liberty Report Extra where they bring on other guests to just talk to Daniel McAdams. And I was the first person on their show ever, right? And I the very first Ron Paul Liberty Report Extra had me on to talk about my book. I thought that was very, very cool. And so I thought it might be good. Ron Paul is a member of Congress. He's a, you know, paleo conservative. And he gave this statement about the war in Iran. This is Ron Paul, longtime member of Congress, conservative, Republican, libertarian Republican, paleo conservative. This is what he said about the war against Iran.
Incrementally calling attention to the American people, the stupidity of fighting a war in Iran. I imagine there's 60 or 70% of the American people, if you ask them to point out exactly where is Iran, they might have trouble doing that. If you ask them, why are we fighting them? Are they bad people? Were they about to attack us? And they say, well, I don't know, blah, 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 blah. But maybe the president knows a lot more than we do. But anyway, we're in it. We've been in it before. You know, it was Korea, it was Vietnam, it was the Eastern War, the Middle East War, and it was Afghanistan, it was Ukraine, it was Venezuela, on and on. It's amazing, really, it's amazing, because I believe that eventually what happens with an empire is they overspend, overextend, and they collapse. And I see signs of our empire collapsing, which, if we could preserve our liberties, is a good idea. We don't need an empire, and it never works out. So, because not only does it become a financial thing, it becomes an issue with personal liberties.
I think the betrayal of Donald Trump is probably complete now. I mean, we're now, I remember the election very clearly, what he was elected to do, what the American people, myself included, expected of him, and it's all gone by the wayside. Starting with, he was supposed to get the government off our backs, shrink the state. Absolutely not. I mean, the deficits, spending are all just rising. Supposed to end not another penny for Ukraine. Nope. Didn't do that either. Ukraine war is still going. And then the big one, no more Middle East wars. And look at what he's done. You know, now he's neck deep in it, from 4 days to it was going to be 4 weeks to now there's no time limits. So their plans don't work, and they're just going to no time limits. We're just going to do what we want, and you're going to have to deal with it. And all of this is occurring in an America that is broken. You know, that was the whole point. This guy was supposed to be the vehicle to help fix us. But the job losses galore, the layoffs, his trade war totally flopped. $21 trillion isn't being invested. It was supposed to be invested back in December. Forget about that. The tariffs backfired. And now the costs are being, piled onto us. Our gas prices are going up. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed. That's 20 to 25% of the world's energy. Every single thing we do relies on oil, and now that has been closed because of President Trump's decision to start this war, which he has done while we're already down on the ground, and now we're getting kicked with even higher costs. So he can't fake it. I know he wants everything is A+++, but you can't fake it for long, because the American people, our pockets are empty.
Yeah. And I've been seeing, I want to talk about a couple things here when it comes to what that guy just said on the Ron Paul Liberty Report, right? I've been seeing posts going around the internet saying, well, this war isn't being waged for oil because so much oil is being destroyed, because the Strait of Hormuz is being destroyed. This war isn't being waged for oil. Well, that's because you don't understand how the oil markets work. When oil becomes scarce, when the amount of oil on the market goes down, the price of oil goes up. This is supply and demand. And I actually gave a talk on this concept, in Brazil, of all places, a few years ago. They invited me to Brazil, and we turned that talk. It's actually available as a book called Oil and the Capitalist Crisis. I think I've got a copy of it around here somewhere, but it's, I think it's one of the first books I ever put out. It's like a pamphlet of the speech that I gave, in Brazil, about oil price manipulation and the oil bankers, and it's a decent talk that I gave, and I can show you a couple clips from it, I mean, it was an important speech, and I went to Brazil. It was in the middle of the oil price drop that happened in 2014. And they had me come to Brazil and give a talk about how oil prices are being manipulated. Yeah, I'll just put on a clip of that talk. I'm not going to show the whole thing. It's one of my better talks, actually, and it's available in a book form. There's like a pamphlet sized book of this presentation that I gave in Brazil. There's also, it's republished various places, but, Yeah, this is like how my talk opened. I talked out like who are the richest people in the world. I guess this is like a provocative video somebody made of it, and then from there. So here we go.
Who are the richest people in the world? Often this question will be answered. They'll give us names like Bill Gates, Carlos Slim, Warren Buffett, some Arab sultan or prince. Forbes magazine publishes a list of the 100 richest people in the world. This is all utter nonsense. The richest people in the world, they can really be described with two words: oil bankers. These oil and banking dynasties sit at the center of a small network of deeply entrenched and powerful influence, dominating the economies of the United States, Western Europe, and most of the planet. Today, the wealth and influence of two of the most important oil banking cliques is combined. The House of Rockefeller holds control over the largest super major oil company. ExxonMobil is their personal property. There is no key aspect of the global economy that the oil bankers haven't put their stamp on and tried very hard to influence. There is no key aspect of the global economy that the oil bankers haven't put their stamp on and tried very hard to influence.
Yeah, and that talk that I gave, oil and the global capitalist crisis in Brazil, there were hundreds or actually thousands of oil workers there who heard me give this presentation. It was translated. It was with a Portuguese translator. We have a version of it where we edited out the translation that's available. But it was quite a talk, and it's available as a book. And we talk about, basically when Iraq was destroyed, that shot up the oil prices. And every time they put sanctions on Russia and make it harder for Russia to export oil, the oil prices go up, right? And so this isn't a loss. And this is part of the thing that people don't get, right? I have a lot of people who say, well, Caleb, you're all for growth. Capitalists want growth. Well, no, monopolistic capitalists don't want growth. They want to stay at the top. They want to maintain their monopoly. Lower level capitalists want growth, but monopolistic capitalists don't. They want to maintain their monopoly. And degrowth. Well, degrowth is against capitalism, Caleb. No, it's not. The richest of the rich, the ultra rich capitalists, they want to stop growth so they can maintain their monopolistic position, right? And that there's a lot of confusion on these kinds of points that a lot of people don't get. They don't get this, right? That if you're a monopoly, if you have a monopoly on oil, the more valuable oil becomes, the better, and the less people on the market competing with you, the better, right? Having a war with Iran, blowing up and destroying Iraq, blowing up and destroying Libya, all of that was very, very, very good for ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. Because again, every barrel of oil somebody doesn't, buys from ExxonMobil, someone buys from Venezuela or Iran or Iraq or Libya, they didn't buy it from them. And when you took those countries off the market, the value of oil increased because these countries were removed. So not only did you remove the competitor, but then the price of what they're selling goes up. And these are the games that people play. And I mean, it's worth noting, right, that the USA has allowed Russia to start selling oil in ways they haven't previously done. And that, Russia is now selling oil to India. They've granted a license to certain companies in India to start buying Russian oil. And so, I mean, there's games going on here, right? And that, this is certainly a disaster. The price of gasoline has gone up significantly. I did actually go to a gas station in New York, and RT ran this report that I did. I think I can show this on here. RT, ran this report where I interviewed people about the gas prices. So here we go.
Several major Middle Eastern oil producers have cut production, with Iraq being the most impacted. It's slashed production by 1.5 million barrels per day. Kuwait has also throttled back, while countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia reportedly may be forced to follow suit amid damage to facilities and the lack of safe export routes. Fears of uncertainty and soaring petrol prices have prompted UK consumers to start forming lines at the pumps, as locals fear the prices will keep growing. And Americans are feeling the effects of the war as well, with the local prices spiking 10% this week. RT's Caleb Mopin is in New York and gets reaction from the locals.
Gas prices across America have gone up about 11% over the last week. That's an increase of roughly 34 cents per gallon. That's American consumers being hit by the costs of conflict in the Middle East. As Iran and the United States are exchanging missiles and tensions are rising and the Strait of Hormuz is closed, it looks like American consumers are having to pay some of the cost. We decided to talk to some New Yorkers here at this gas station in Brooklyn and see how they feel about the situation.
It's crazy. Crazy what's happening.
Why?
Because of the wars. We're funding the wars. And they're raising that's from our pockets.
Billy, it's a little about this war he's declared on Iran.
Yeah. Think it's worth it?
No, I don't.
Tell me more.
Well, I just don't think we should be invading countries that we have no reason to be going into.
Right. He promised us no more wars. He didn't keep any of his promises. And he's a puppet for Netanyahu.
You think the gas prices are going to get worse?
Probably. Probably.
You just gotta hope everything ends quickly and everything comes down little by little. I think we should mind our own business and worry about us over here in the United States.
I think they gotta stop this. I mean, it's not worth it, man. It's gotta stop. We want peace. Well, at least the citizens here, I know they want peace.
Now, Trump promised you would get gas prices down to less than $2 a gallon. But now Americans are paying roughly $3.50. And we didn't hear a lot of optimism here at the gas tank. A lot of Americans expect that as international tensions increase and as the situation around the world, especially in the Middle East, remains more and more unclear, it's probably going to get worse. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Yeah, that was my report. It was on air today, and you know, I actually got a lot more footage of people at the gas tank. So keep your eye out. In the next couple days, I'll post like a much longer. I had a lot of interviews with people at the gas station. I was at the gas station like all day interviewing people, and so I've got a much longer piece that'll be here on YouTube. I also went out to a Muslim neighborhood and I posted that earlier, and I've been at some anti-war protests, so just keep your eye out. I've got a lot of good stuff coming to YouTube here in the next few days. We're just doing a lot of stuff. So there's one other thing, just one other thing I wanted to comment on, right? Which is, you know, look, we here on this channel, the reason, you know, I shouldn't say the reason, but you know, I mean, part of why I think that maybe this channel isn't huge, right? I mean, we've got about 40,000 subscribers. It's not small. Part of the reason it isn't huge is because I refuse to pander. If I see something that is true, I will say it. If I see something that is false, I will call it out, even if it doesn't go along with the narrative. And right now, I am going to call out something that is false, right? Donald Trump has a spiritual advisor. There is a woman who is Donald Trump's spiritual advisor. Her name is Paula White Cain. And Paula White Cain, I mean, she's not that political. You can go to her Twitter right now, and you will have to really, really dig to find anything about this war. There's some mild support for it, and she supports Israel, and she's not, you know, screaming from the heavens about supporting the war. I mean, but, you know, she probably supports it. She is in Trump's administration. She does support Israel. But look at her page. There's barely anything on there about the war, right? I mean, she's really not a big supporter of the war. She's just a prosperity preacher. She barely ever talks about politics, right? You know, you got look at her Twitter right now. Go to Paula White Cain's X. You know, you'll find a whole lot of Bible verses. You'll find, you know, stuff about God can give you strength. God can, you know, help you to have prosperity and abundance in your life, grace and mercy. You have to really, really scroll down to find anything political. Occasionally, yeah, she supports Israel. She says Israel is important. And she did go pray with Trump along with like 12 other pastors when this conflict began. She was in the room with like 12 other pastors praying with Trump about this war. But she's not really that political. You know, she's just Paula White Cain. But I have seen there's a clip of her that's been around for years. It's been around for years. This clip has been around of Paula White Cain, you know, urging, like driving the demons out, right? And, you know, this clip has nothing to do with this war against Iran. This clip is years old. This clip is probably, if not 3 or 4 years old, this clip is probably 5 years old. It's a really, really old clip. But because in the clip she's saying strike, right? And she's charismatic. She speaks in tongues. She does kind of a hypnotic thing when she speaks, and she, you know, So she gets fired up and she's, urging to drive the demons out of the room, saying that God will help you be successful. People are taking this clip and claiming in this clip she's calling for Trump to, strike Iran. It's just a lie. This is the clip that's going around. And if you see this clip, it's everywhere. I've never seen it. It's like everywhere. Oh my God, this woman is calling for Trump to strike Iran. This is not what this clip is. You can look, this clip is years old, has absolutely nothing to do with this war.
Angels are being released right now. Angels are being dispatched right now. Hamanda aka ata raka teda baka sanda ata ambo osa kata rite eke banda ata rike didi ashata. For angels have even been dispatched from Africa right now. Africa right now. Africa right now. From Africa right now.
Yeah. What? That clip has absolutely nothing to do with the war in Ukraine, right? I mean, or the war in Iran. It has nothing to do with it, right? It's just her doing her normal charismatic thing. She's up there speaking in tongues and waving her arms. She's just, and they're lying about it. And it's weird because there are plenty of people in Trump's administration who are evangelical fanatics who are totally to blame for this war. One of them is Mike Huckabee. Cancel Mike Huckabee. We're not canceling him. We're canceling somebody who barely ever talks about this conflict, right? And Gavin, it is pandering to anti-Christian sentiment. That's what it is, right? The war in Iran is not her fault, right? She might be wrong. You might disagree with her religiously. And she is wrong on the Israel question for sure. I don't agree with her about Israel at all. But she is not leading the charge for this war. She's just not doing it, right? She's a prosperity preacher. She's got a church in Miami, Florida, and Trump likes her because Donald Trump grew up in the church of Norman Vincent Peale, the guy who did the power of positive thinking, right? And she's into the same kind of belief, right? The belief that if you believe, you can have abundance, right? She's a prosperity preacher, and Trump likes that kind of thing. She's not political. And there is a weird obsessive hate for her, online for years. There are old documentaries about her, and they attack her on a personal level for the fact that, she used to be married to this pastor and there was an extramarital affair. So there was some drama there. There is a weird obsessive hatred for Paula White Cain because she's not part of the club. There is a club, right? Of the evangelicals, right? Pat Robertson and, Liberty University and Jerry Falwell Jr. And there's like a club, and Paula is not in the club. And she is very much a self-made woman, right? I mean, she very much, comes from a Southern family. Her father committed suicide when she was a young person, I think when she was a child. And she's dedicated herself to kind of putting out this kind of optimistic, charismatic message. And she's very much, worked hard and achieved her own thing. And she has her own following. And yeah, she supports Israel, which is the standard evangelical position. And that's wrong, but she's not the one. And I've noticed it's weird. And you type her in, like her name, you type it into YouTube. In the last 2 or 3 days, there are loads of videos that have come out attacking her that don't say anything about the war with Iran, that are just attacking her on a personal level, right? It's very, very weird. And I don't think it's right. I don't think it is. If you want to go after Huckabee for what he said, go for it, right? If you want to go after Marco Rubio, go for it. There's plenty of hypocritical Christians you can attack, but why is she being singled out, and why are they taking a clip of her from years ago and lying to people and saying it's about the war with Iran? It's not, right? And I am telling you, the people who control the internet are evil. All right. There are evil forces that control the internet, and they will look for any opportunity whatsoever to target people they don't like for bad reasons. And if we're going to oppose this war in Iran, we should oppose the war, not Christianity. Christianity didn't cause this war. Belief in God certainly didn't cause this war. The Iranians have been building an anti-imperialist state on the basis of their Islamic faith in God for, 47 years. So I mean, don't cancel Paula White Cain. And when something blows up this big, right, there's something else behind it. I tend to think that despite whatever her flaws are, Paula White Cain is not so bad, right? She's not perfect. She's not where we're at politically, but she's not so bad. And I will also say that Paula White Cain is an advocate of peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula and has been quite outspoken about that, right? She actually wants to negotiate and lift sanctions against North Korea. She's visited South Korea and advocated that, along with Dr. Hak Jahan, who is currently in prison in South Korea. And so Paula has a good side in addition, and her bad side is pretty limited. Again, look at her Twitter. She's not screaming in support of this war at all. So don't jump on the bandwagon against Paula White Cain. It's not coming from a good place. Look, I have written the book about Khrushchevism and, you know, the study in psychological warfare, and that there are games that are being played. And, you know, there's much better ways to speak out against this war than to target Paula White Cain. You know, of all the reasons that one, you know, ways one can speak up against this war. I mean, you know, Paula White Cain, who has been so widely defamed on the internet. I mean, there's like a weird obsessive hatred for Paula White Cain. Again, they call her, you know, they bring up her previous marriage. They bring up her personal stuff. I mean, they attack her on it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. There is no, it's an unhealthy hatred that's not coming from a good place, and it's coming from the establishment, right? And there are plenty of pro-establishment Zionist Christians that are knee-deep in this conflict and helping make it happen. She's not one of them. So why is she being singled out? But anyway, folks, I do want to remind you that if you have a question for the second half of the show, you can send it in as a Rumble rant. You can send it in as a Cash App, Caleb Maupin 22. But the best way to do it is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send your question. That's the absolute best way to send your question. And folks, I am going to put on, just for a brief moment, some clips from our recent protest. And then when I get back, I'm going to read to you a chapter from my book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. I'm going to read you from that book as well. I think this book actually explains the basis of some of the more hawkish factions. We talk about neocons. People always bring up that the neoconservatives and Trotsky have a relationship. I wrote the book on this. There is no other book on this specific topic that has ever been written. I wrote the book on it, and I'm going to start reading to you from that. Then we'll do the roll call, and then I'll answer people's questions before saying goodnight. So I'm going to put on just a clip. I have to go get some more water because my throat is dry. But I'm going to put on, some of the video from our recent protest while I go get some more water. And then from there, we can, at that point, we can start reading from the book, and then I'll answer people's questions. So yeah, I'm just gonna put on the video. I thought I had it more accessible, but I'm gonna put on, we had a National Day of Action a week ago, no war with Iran. It was a great success. I'm not gonna show the whole video tonight, but I'm gonna show parts of that video while I go and get my water. Then we'll read from the book, and then after that, I will answer people's questions. I saw that a couple people have sent questions in already. Gavin sent a question, and so did a couple other people. If you want to send a question for the second half of the show, go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. That's the best way to do it. You can also do Rumble rants. That's another way to send a question. And you can Cash App me at Caleb Maupin 22. Those are the best ways to send the questions. I'm going to put the rallies on, the great rallies. Our members did a great job around the country with these no war against Iran rallies. I'm going to put on this for a few minutes while I go and get some water. Then I'll read to you from the Trotsky book, and then from there, I will answer people's questions. So send in some questions for the second half of the show. I'm going to put video from our anti-war rally, and we'll go from there. So here's the rally.
Within the White House. I don't know if you guys saw, Trump gets on TV this morning. He goes, "Oh, American patriots are going to die. Oh, and that's okay. That's okay because the children of the Epstein class won't be the people going out to fight and die so that we can get regime change in Iran. It won't be the bankers on Wall Street who go out and fight and die. It won't be the politicians in the White House or in Congress. It won't be any of the elites who are holding our country hostage in a war that does not benefit the American people. The American people do not want a war. 80% of the American people are opposed to this war. American soldiers do not want to fight the Iranian people.
We have no democracy anymore. We have no constitution, and we need to take back our republic. Otherwise, there will be increasing wars, unstopped wars.
It's absolutely disgraceful. Not one American serviceman should die for Israel's war in the Middle East. Not one American serviceman should come home in a body bag, and our servicemen do not want to fight. On the aircraft carriers that they have parked outside of Iran, you have thousands of American servicemen intentionally clogging the toilets and trying to flood the aircraft carrier because they know that the Iranian people are not their enemy. They know that Wall Street is their enemy. The most anti-war people in this country are our servicemen. And why? Because they're actually the people that are going over there to fight.
Enough war! You were lied to about Iraq. You were lied to about Afghanistan. You were lied to about every war that has ever been fought in this country. Enough wars for nothing. Bring our troops home, protect the United States. Clean up this country. Put them to work.
Hey, CPI is out here on the streets of Portland, Oregon to say no war with Iran.
We need peace now. Iran did not attack us. Iran actually doesn't want nuclear weapons, but they have a right to develop nuclear power as any country has.
We should not start a war in Iran. Let Trump figure that out. This isn't our war. Our war is in the USA where we got to worry about our own people. He is putting Americans last. He's Israel first. Trump is for Israel, you guys.
Oh, hey, Tony, what's going on? What's going on? We got war with Iran. Hennepin County Medical Center, the biggest hospital in Minneapolis, is going to close this summer. Why? Because we got money for war, and we got money for ICE, we're killing American citizens. Her name's Paul Good, Alex Preddy. We got money for war. Iran is not our enemy. Epstein and the Israel lobby are the enemy. No war for bail. Iran is not our enemy.
All right. I'll start off by saying that I do not speak for everyone here. These opinions are my own. But I want to say I do think it is wrong that the military murdered Ayatollah Khamenei. He was a strong leader who protected religious freedom in Iran. He protected Christians, protected Muslims, protected Jews. He had provided good healthcare and education for people, and so I think it's wrong to go kill leaders, especially good ones.
Well, I'm at a major intersection in St. Louis, trying to let people know that Iran is not our enemy. I've received a lot of positive feedback from people, but we all need to get out of our comfort zones and get into the streets and protest this insidious war.
Why are you here protesting today?
Oh, hi. Thanks for asking. I'm here because of what's happening with the U.S. agreeing to bomb Iran with Israel. This is not what the people want. 80% of the American people are pissed off about this.
The world is watching us because we are in the belly of the beast, but we are the heart of free speech. And that is why I'm able to get up here and say, free the world from tyranny.
Affordability. That's one of the huge issues in America right now. People can't pay rent, can't buy a house, can't afford their car, can't afford car insurance, food, you name it. And fighting Iran isn't going to help that. In fact, it's going to hurt it because you're going to see there's going to be a reaction in the market because you're going to have a disruption to trade. You're going to have a disruption to the crude oil movement. That's going to make things a lot worse. So Americans want nothing to do with this. They're not going to benefit. There's a tiny, tiny little group of people that we know now as the Epstein class. They are the ones perpetrating this war.
Video of the Francis Scott Key Bridge near Baltimore collapsing. Tell me, did the Iranians collapse that bridge? No. That bridge was collapsed because the public budget doesn't have enough to maintain the infrastructure of America. You look around this country, they are literally unpaving the roads in 27 different states.
All right. Well, yeah, and if you want to get involved in rallies like that, join the Center for Political Innovation. We're always doing great messages like that. We need jobs and schools for America, not wars. You can join CPI and get involved. Join the Center for Political Innovation. We're always doing great stuff. I'll just put the link down below. We've always got great activities going on, and we just had a great meeting. We've got some big things planned. We're having house parties around the country on March 15th to tell the story of the Ides of March and the death of Julius Caesar. That's going to be pretty awesome, and we're planning some outreach at the end of the month, some interventions in the No Kings rallies to oppose the war with Iran. In addition to that, we got a convention coming up in August. I'm going to be headed around the country to some workshops that we're doing. We're always building this organization, right? We need an organization. The only thing that's going to stop these wars is when there's a real organization, a real anti-imperialist movement in this country. That's what it's going to take to actually stop these wars. Now, on that note, I'm going to read to you all from my book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. A lot of people have talked about how the neocons used to be Trotskyites. There's a lot there. There's actually an interesting story there, and I decided I would write the book. So this is my book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. I'm going to read to you from it. After that, we'll do the roll call, and then I'll answer people's questions. So if you've got any questions for the second half of the show, you can send them. The best way to do it is go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. But you can also send questions via Rumble Rants. You can also cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. All right. So Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. Introduction. A question that needs real answers. Leon Trotsky was a lifelong Marxist intellectual. He was the leader of the Red Army during the Russian Civil War and a founder of the Soviet government. Even after being exiled from the USSR, he continued spending his life building Marxist organizations and speaking for what he considered to be the genuine principles of Bolshevism. Yet, from among his intellectual disciples and members of his Fourth International emerged some of the key strategists of the Republican Party and U.S. foreign policy in the final years of the Cold War. This irony has long been a source of discussion. During the Bush administration, talk of the neocons popped up with documentaries like The Power of Nightmares, The Rise of Politics of Fear on BBC in 2004. Libertarians and old rightists who opposed the Bush administration's war and violations of civil liberties developed a narrative to explain it, a narrative that was embraced by Alex Jones at the time when he was much more obscure. The narrative was that communism is an ideology that seeks to destroy freedom, and the neoconservatives, like the communists, share this desire to enslave mankind. The narrative went on to argue that the Bush doctrine of, quote, spreading freedom was permanent revolution, as Trotsky had written of, intended to usher in global communist dictatorship. This narrative is wrong on a number of counts. It fails to take into account that Trotsky turned against the Soviet Union and was convicted in absentia of sedition against the Soviet state and agreed to testify before the U.S. Congressional Committee against Roosevelt for being friendly to the USSR, and was eventually killed as the Second World War was breaking out, while he was actively urging the labor movement to be neutral and not cooperate with Allied mobilizations against the Nazis. At the time of his death, Trotsky was fundamentally at odds with both Soviet and American foreign policy and regarded as a Nazi sympathizer and fifth column element by both governments. Trotsky's followers in the United States were imprisoned for trying to unionize the army and disrupt the war effort, and the Communist Party celebrated their imprisonment. Neoconservatives glorify the U.S. victory in the Second World War and regard Hitler as the prototype for all illiberal and authoritarian governments. Neoconservatives view the United States as having a noble mission to spread freedom and were anti-communist in a completely different way than Trotsky had been anti-Soviet. Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution and efforts to spread freedom by overthrowing governments in the developing world simply do not line up at all, and this is apparent to those familiar with the subject. A much less politically correct narrative, rooted in classical anti-Semitism, has emerged as well. The narrative has been lurking in the background and is now blasted across social media by Nick Fuentes. The claim is that Bolshevism and Zionist neoconservatism are both expressions of the evil Jewish people and their satanic plot against European civilization. This narrative is also rather delusional. Trotsky was more anti-Zionist than Stalin was, and after his death, Stalin enabled the State of Israel to come into existence in 1948 within the United Nations, while Trotskyites maintained their opposition to it throughout the 1950s and up into the 1980s. When opposition to Israel was taboo among leftists, Trotskyites were among the most outspoken critics of Israel. Vanessa Redgrave, an actress who was a member of the Workers' Revolutionary Party, led by Jerry Healy, condemned Zionist hoodlums from the stage of the Academy Awards in 1978. Trotsky was killed primarily because he was seen by the Soviet government as opposing the Allied position in the Second World War and aiding Hitler by seeking to spread anti-war sentiments within the labor movement. If he was part of a vast, quote, Judeo plot, it is unlikely he'd be perceived as cooperating with the perpetrators of the Holocaust. To view Trotsky as an agent of a Judeo-Bolshevik cabal against the white man fits shallow far-right narratives that have been around for generations, but it doesn't match the nuances of the facts. The real story of how and why various New York intellectuals who were members of the Socialist Workers' Party and its organizational predecessors ultimately ended up being Republican war hawks by the 1970s is very interesting and nuanced. Rather than highlighting a hatred for freedom by totalitarians or a supposed Judeo-Bolshevik plot, the story actually says a lot more about the collective West. It points to very important realities about the problems Western countries are facing, both internally and internationally. In these times, Israel and Zionism is a factor in the story, but not the primary one. This is a story that is complex but important, and it must be told, and I am happy to tell it. This book is being written in the direct aftermath of Putin and Trump meeting in Alaska. As we hope for peace and a resolution of the brutal conflict that was, in reality, proxy forces of NATO battling Russia at the cost of over 1 million lives, we must examine why Western civilization is in crisis and what is driving these endless wars. This book will point to answers that are urgently needed by examining the intellectual trajectory of those chosen by those who rule over us to direct not just foreign policy, but art, culture, and philosophy. How did they go from Trotskyism to neoconservatism? Read and learn. These are the facts. Chapter 1, Leon Trotsky's Life and Death. Lev Bronstein, who eventually became known to the world as Leon Trotsky, was born in 1879 in Kherson, a region of the Russian Empire that is currently contested between Russia and Ukraine on the battlefield, and was considered part of Ukraine when the borders were first drawn up during the early years of the Soviet Union. He was born to a Jewish family and sent to study in Odessa as a young man. No doubt his family experienced a huge amount of anti-Semitism. Hatred of Jews was widespread in the Russian Empire, and pogroms against Jewish villages were regularly mobilized. The deeply religious Russian peasantry tended to be the most virulent in their contempt for Jews as a group of others who were considered untrustworthy and morally questionable due to their non-Christian religious beliefs and their historical involvement in money lending. As a young man, Trotsky got involved in Russia's revolutionary intelligentsia, which was vast. Russia remained a medieval autocracy and an empire, while Europe had experienced all kinds of revolutions, creating democratic republics and modern nation states. Feudal relations were largely intact, and many of Russia's educated strata wanted their country to modernize and move toward a more Western-style government and economic system. The vast networks of educated young men trading illegal pamphlets talking about toppling Tsarism, creating a more egalitarian society, rushing to support peasant revolts and strikes, and occasionally engaging in terrorist bombings or assassinations were a big part of Russian society in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The revolutionary intelligentsia is a topic of many popular novels by Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and Gorky. The constitutional Democrats, or cadets, were the Russians who advocated a Western-style liberal democratic government. In addition to them, there were the Narodniks, a group that advocated the peasants rising up against the landlords. The Narodniks were widely mocked in Russia as an embarrassing and failing radical trend. Wealthy students would dress up as poor peasants and go live among the rural farm workers, hoping to incite them to revolt. Eventually, Peter Kropotkin would become the most well-known intellectual voice for a movement of rural anarchists, and his manifesto, The Conquest of Bread, is still studied by middle-class radicals right up to today. Trotsky was convinced to abandon Narodnikism and became a Marxist by a woman who eventually became his first wife, the revolutionary activist Alexandria Sokolovskaya. The Marxist movement in Russia had been founded by Georgy Plekhanov and defined itself as focusing on organizing industrial workers rather than the rural poor. From the emancipation of labor group and various Marxist factions that had sought to lend the economic struggle a political character by building a political party that supported labor unions, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party eventually emerged. Trotsky was an effective writer and orator and became a respected voice among the Russian Marxists. In 1903, Trotsky was invited to a meeting of Russian radicals in London, where Vladimir Lenin pitched his concept of a party of new type, centered around a theoretical journal, Iskra. The majority of those in the room accepted Lenin's proposal and became the Bolsheviks. The minority, who represented the majority of Russian Marxists, rejected the proposal and became known as the Mensheviks. Trotsky was sympathetic to Iskra, and he wrote articles for it, and he shared many of Lenin's critiques of the Mensheviks and their ineffective strategy of tailism and building a loose organization. However, when the Bolsheviks moved to create their own organization and expel the Mensheviks in 1912, Trotsky rejected the idea. He proposed the August Bloc, which was to be a more radical faction within the Mensheviks, a militant minority that would push the wider Russian Marxist organization in a more revolutionary direction. When the Bolsheviks formally expelled the Mensheviks in 1912, Trotsky went with the Mensheviks and formed his new organization. The group that came out of Trotsky's August Bloc was formerly called the Russian Social Democratic Party Internationalist and commonly called the Interdistrictites because they represented a compromised position between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Trotsky spent the bulk of his life before the 1917 revolution in exile. In Paris, Vienna, Berlin, and various other cities that were home to bohemian districts of wealthy radicals, Trotsky filled auditoriums with his lectures given in the various languages he spoke. His books sold in large numbers. He became one of the most well-known Marxist writers and a kind of representative of the Russian revolutionary opposition to Western audiences. Trotsky's defining belief was a concept called the permanent revolution, which he admitted had first been conceived by Alexander Parvus. The idea was that impoverished and semi-feudal countries could indeed become led by the working class after a revolution, something that the Mensheviks denied. Countries like Russia were still largely agrarian and not industrialized, could then become base areas to spread a working class revolution to the centers of the global economy in the West and bring communism to the entire world. As Trotsky explained when republishing his pamphlet Results and Prospects, his theory teaches, once having power, the proletariat cannot keep within the limits of bourgeois democracy. It must adopt tactics of permanent revolution, go over to more and more radical reforms, and seek to support a revolution in Western Europe. As Peter Camejo explained in his introduction to Trotsky's work on the subject of permanent revolution, the interpretation of Marxism Trotsky put forward, quote, did not conceive of a socialist society except as a world system, which would not only have a higher level of production and consumption, but far more freedoms than the most advanced liberal capitalisms. It could not be erected, as the Stalinists were to teach, in a single country, let alone a backward one at that. The development of socialism in a country like Russia, and really anywhere else in the world, according to Trotsky, was dependent on the victory of the working class in the colonial homelands. What is now called the collective West was the center of Trotsky's universe, and would always be so, despite his birth elsewhere. He called New York City the foundry where the fate of mankind will be forged. Lenin's groundbreaking work, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, said the revolutionary energy of the world was shifting to the East and the colonized world. Lenin predicted that it would not be the struggles between workers and employers, but the struggle of entire nations for liberation from imperialist domination that would bring socialism into the world. Trotsky never accepted this worldview. Lenin wanted the Russian revolutionaries to mobilize both the peasantry and the workers, and he called for a revolutionary dictatorship of workers and peasants. He sought to raise the demand of peasants for land redistribution as a way to align them with the working class. Trotsky saw peasants as inherently backward and condemned mobilizing an alliance with the peasantry, writing, quote, but whatever conditions may be, the proletariat must clearly see as its path and take it consciously. Above everything else, it must be free from illusions. And the worst illusion from all history is that the proletariat has taken until now has been reliance on others. He wrote, the less it adapts to passivity and limitations of petty bourgeois and peasantry, the more resolute and irreconcilable its fight becomes. Nothing, of course, will be accomplished by putting forward mere slogans such as for the confiscation of land. Alexander Parvus, the mentor of Trotsky, to whom he credited his theory of permanent revolution, was a Russian-born Marxist who eventually moved to Germany and became elected to the Reichstag as a social democrat. Parvus, we now know, was a primary asset of the German secret police. He was an arms dealer for the Ottoman Empire. He later arranged for Lenin to return to Russia from exile amid the revolutionary turmoil of 1917, something he did on behalf of German intelligence in the hopes that Lenin would sow confusion and weaken Russia's role in the war. One of Trotsky's primary activities during the pre-war years was to advocate for a United States of Europe. The idea was that all of the Western nations would merge into a single country, a European Union. This would break down national barriers and create working class solidarity. Lenin vehemently opposed the idea, saying it would strengthen the power of the Western imperialist monopolies and their ability to plunder the world. Lenin argued that it was also in the interests of workers and oppressed to divide the Western countries and further divisions among the colonial powers. Lenin's essay, Imperialism and the Split in Socialism, lampooned this concept. Nevertheless, as early as 1902, he had an excellent insight into the meaning and significance of the United States of Europe, be it said for the benefit of Trotsky, the Kautskyite, and all that is now being glossed over by hypocritical Kautskyites of various countries, namely that the opportunists and social chauvinists are working hand in glove with the imperialist bourgeoisie precisely toward creating an imperialist Europe on the backs of Asia and Africa, and that objectively the opportunists are a section of the petty bourgeoisie and of a certain strata of the working class who have been bribed out of imperialist super profits and converted to watchdogs of capitalism and corruptors of the labor movement. As far as Lenin was concerned, the bulk of the European Marxist parties and labor unions had been bought off and were used by the Western monopolies to mobilize working class people to support their wars. Lenin felt it was necessary to form a completely new organization, rejecting social democracy entirely. He wrote, "It is therefore our duty, if we wish to remain socialists, to go down lower and deeper to the real masses. This is the whole meaning and the whole purport of the struggle against opportunism. By exposing the fact that the opportunists and social chauvinists are in reality betraying and selling the interests of the masses, that they are defending the temporary privileges of a minority of the workers, that they are vehicles of bourgeois idea and influences, that they are really allies and agents of the bourgeoisie. We are teaching the masses to appreciate their true political interests, to fight for socialism and for revolution through all the long and painful vicissitudes of imperialist wars and imperialist armistices. The only Marxist line in the labor movement is to explain to the masses the inevitability and necessity of breaking with opportunism, to educate them for revolution by waging a relentless struggle against opportunism, to utilize the experiences of war to expose, not conceal, the utter vileness of national liberal labor politics." Trotsky rejected this notion, instead arguing that European social democracy could be pushed in a better direction. While this position defined Trotsky throughout his life. While Lenin regarded social democracy as the enemy, Trotsky always felt that the wider Western socialist movement and its labor unions were his political home, as much as he might be frustrated by them. He and his movement always sought to be the more radical opposition in a room filled with moderate social democrats and labor bosses, fighting for their position and trying to nudge a part of the Western colonial establishment toward better positions. Lenin's worldview was fundamentally anti-Western. He saw the Western imperialist system as the main barrier to human progress and sought to mobilize the oppressed peoples of the colonized countries of the world against it, and to align the working class of Western countries with them. Trotsky saw the West as the immovable center of the world and believed no revolutionary movement had hope until the West changed its character and went into the hands of the industrial working class. At the time of the Russian Revolution, Trotsky was living in New York City, editing a Russian-language Marxist publication. Trotsky was a well-known speaker among radicals and expats, and he gained a reputation for refusing to tip in restaurants, instead giving the waiter a speech how he should form a union. An article from the Institute for Advanced Studies in Culture, published on May 20th, 2015, repeats this widely reported anecdote. Leon Trotsky refused to tip, so the story goes. In 1917, when he lived for 10 weeks in the Bronx, he would lunch in Jewish immigrant cafes. There, he not only declined to tip, but would also instruct the other customers to follow his example. Neither of these actions endeared him to the waiters, who would spill soup on him as revenge. Trotsky remained unmoved. Eventually, the waiters refused to serve him, which, it turns out, was Trotsky's goal. Tipping, he believed, subsidized unfair labor practices. If the waiters were to be paid enough, tipping would be unnecessary. Until then, they should refuse to do their jobs. When the Tsar abdicated, Trotsky and many other Russian exiled revolutionaries headed home. Trotsky's organization merged into the Bolsheviks in July of 1917. After the seizure of power in the October Revolution, Trotsky became the foreign minister of the Soviet government. He was assigned the important task of negotiating peace with Germany. The Bolsheviks had taken power on the slogan, "Peace, Land, and Bread," and the primary political demand that had propelled them toward war was their promise to end the war. However, many Bolshevik leaders felt that now that they were in power, a different war could be waged against Germany, one of a revolutionary character. Lenin vehemently disagreed and insisted the Bolsheviks keep their promises and end involvement in the First World War as they had promised to do. Trotsky was dispatched to negotiate the terms of ending the conflict with the Germans. The press reported that when he was meeting to negotiate the treaty, he stalled engaging in debate rising to subtle discussion of first principles that ranged far beyond the concrete territorial issues that divided them. Trotsky made a point of disrespecting the German delegation and lecturing them on the revolutionary ideals of the new regime. He returned to Moscow with no treaty and announced that the new Soviet government could have no war but no peace, and demobilize fighting without ever signing a treaty with the Germans. Lenin was absolutely furious, and ultimately the Bolsheviks signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, ceding huge swaths of territory as a result of Trotsky's mismanagement. Trotsky resigned as foreign minister. From 1917 to 1921, the Soviet government waged a civil war against foreign invaders and domestic enemies. Millions died in an ugly conflict that involved many brutal massacres of civilians, with the entire country suffering from a blockade that prevented food and medicine from being imported. Trotsky became the public face of the Red Army. Trotsky's autobiography tells how he spent the war, in which hundreds of thousands died, were wounded, or held the line out in the freezing cold inside the warmth of a train car that went from base to base. He recalled, "The arrival of the train put the most isolated unit in touch with the whole army and brought it into life, not only of the country, but of the entire world. Alarmist rumors and doubts were dispelled, and the spirits of men grew firm. This change of morale would last for several weeks, sometimes until the next visit of the train. In the intervals, members of the Revolutionary Military Council of the Front or of the Army would make small trips in character, but smaller on scale." Trotsky was not exaggerating about the impact he had on the morale of the troops. His staged visits to military encampments revealed that he had a high level of skill in the art of propaganda. His visits became elaborate propaganda shows, informal rallies to inspire passion among the soldiers. He would arrange for deserters to be lined up before the firing squads to be executed, and he would arrive just in time to save their lives. He would address crowds of soldiers dressed in an elaborate, expensive costume consisting of leather pants, a leather jacket, and a military visor. He would give fiery speeches to inspire the soldiers to fight for the Bolshevik cause. And he would end his speech by pulling a gold watch from his pocket and awarding it as a prize to a random soldier to thunderous applause from the crowd. It is likely that the Nazi rallies of Nuremberg a few decades later took some inspiration from them, as Goebbels openly praised Bolshevik propaganda, such as the film The Battleship Potemkin. Trotsky was very skilled at exuding the kind of passion, rage, and fanaticism that accompanied all major political movements as the 20th century proceeded, and one could call him a pioneer of the modernist war aesthetic. Once the Civil War was won, the Bolsheviks had to wrangle with the question of how to hold the country together and increase living standards. Trotsky proposed to continue the policy of war communism indefinitely, militarizing the economy and using military methods to mobilize industrial production. Lenin disagreed and pushed for the new economic policy. As Lenin explained, a group of party workers headed by Trotsky, intoxicated by the successes achieved by the military methods in the army, supposes that those methods can and must be adopted among the workers and the trade unions in order to achieve similar successes in strengthening the unions and in reviving industry. But this group forgets that the army and the working class are two different spheres, and that a method that is suitable for the army might prove unsuitable and harmful among the working class and trade unions. Obviously, though normal methods of proletarian democracy in the unions, only methods of persuasion can make it possible to unite the working class, to stimulate its independent activity and strengthen its confidence in Soviet power. Confidence that is much needed in order to rouse the country for the struggle against economic ruin. After Lenin's death, the Bolsheviks debated the way forward. Trotsky continued to push his theory of permanent revolution, aiming for the USSR to exist as a base area for spreading workers' revolution to the Western countries. Trotsky's left opposition was defeated, as was Bukharin's right opposition, with Stalin solidifying his position of socialism in one country in 1927. Trotsky vehemently disagreed with the Communist International's support for the nationalist KMT government of China. He viewed Sun Yat-sen's government as bourgeois nationalist and argued that the Chinese communists should oppose it and build some kind of working class opposition party. Stalin, the Communist International, took the opposite position and directed communists to join the KMT. The Soviet Union also built a military training school in China and aided the Chinese Republic in fighting local warlords who opposed it. This policy resulted in the Communist Party of China expanding in big numbers as the pro-Soviet wing of the ruling party. Trotsky fumed with anger about how enthusiastically the Chinese communists were functioning as members of the KMT. Communists do not simply join the Kuomintang, but they submit to its discipline and even obligate themselves not to criticize Sun Yat-senism. Under these conditions, the petty bourgeois intellectual can only trail behind the nationalist liberal bourgeoisie, which is bound by imperceptible gradations with the compradorian, overtly imperialist bourgeoisie. In 1927, Chiang Kai-shek launched his White Terror to suppress the communists, and they fled to the countryside, forming their own Red Army and launching the People's War that would eventually propel them to power. Trotsky blamed Stalin and the Communist International for the 1927 Red Terror, saying the policy of supporting the KMT had set the Chinese communists up to be massacred. He wrote, "The Chinese Revolution was an examination of the new role of Stalin by the inverse method, having conquered power in the USSR with the aid of the strata who have been breaking away from the international revolution, and with indirect but very real aid of hostile classes, Stalin automatically became the leader of the Comintern, and by that alone, the leader of the Chinese Revolution. The passive hero of the behind-the-scenes apparatus mechanism had to show his method and quality in the events of the great revolutionary flow. Within this lies the tragic paradox of Stalin's role in China. Stalin's leadership in the Chinese Revolution is just the fruit of the combination of theoretical, political, and national limitedness with huge apparatus power. Stalin has proved himself incapable of learning. The undertaker of the Second Chinese Revolution is preparing before our very eyes to strangle the Chinese Revolution at its inception. Years later, as Mao's peasant army was heroically battling Japan, becoming the heroes of the global anti-fascist movement, with best-selling books like Red Star Over China documenting Mao's military brilliance, Trotsky maintained his suspicion. He argued that as a largely peasant country, China's revolution was tainted by this reactionary class. He wrote, "It's one thing when a communist party, firmly resting upon the flower of the urban proletariat, strives through the workers to lead a peasant war. It is altogether different when a few thousand or 10,000 revolutionists who are truly communists or take the name assume the leadership of a peasant war without serious support from the working class. This is precisely the situation in China. In old China, every peasant uprising was concluded by the creation of a new dynasty and subsequently a new large group of proprietors. The movement was caught in a vicious cycle. Under the present conditions, the peasant war by itself, without the direct leadership of the proletarian vanguard, can only pass power to a new bourgeois clique." Trotsky's contempt for the peoples of the East and his rejection of the Leninist understanding that revolutionary energy has shifted in the colonized world due to imperialism was hard to conceal. His book, Stalin: An Appraisal, published in 1940, begins with a tirade that cannot be described as anything but racist, attributing Stalin's alleged tyrannical methods to his background as a Georgian. Quote, the late Leonid Krasin, old revolutionist, eminent engineer, brilliant Soviet diplomat, and above all, intelligent human being, was the first, if I am not mistaken, to call Stalin Asiatic, in saying that he had in mind no problematic racial attributes, but rather the blending of grit, shrewdness, craftiness, and cruelty, which has been considered characteristic of the statesmen of Asia. Bukharin subsequently simplified the appellation, calling Stalin Genghis Khan, manifestly in order to draw attention to his cruelty, which had developed into brutality. Stalin himself, in a conversation with a Japanese journalist, once called himself Asiatic, not in the old but rather new sense of the word. With his personal allusion, he wished to hint at the existence of common interests between the USSR and Japan as against the imperialistic West. Contemplating the term Asiatic from a scientific viewpoint, we must admit that in this instance, it is at least partially correct. Trotsky fled the USSR, first to Turkey, later to France, and ultimately to Mexico. From exile, he built a network of followers who were expelled from the various communist parties around the world. As the world saw it, the Trotskyites were the other communists. An article from Time magazine, dated March 6, 1940, compared the Communist International in Moscow to the Vatican and presented the Trotskyites as Protestants. Nothing so maddens Marxists as to have Marxism called a religion, hence, by their definition, opium. Nevertheless, Marxism has a Bible, Das Kapital, its God, dialectical materialism, its Pope, Stalin, saints, Marx, Engels, and Lenin, martyrs, Liebknecht and Luxemburg, doctrine, the communist line. As in other religions, heresies and schisms crop up occasionally. Heretics are sometimes exiled, often handed over to the secular arm or shot, always excommunicated. Most serious heresy in the eyes of Stalinist true believers is Trotskyism, whose heresiarch is Leon Trotsky, now in exile in Mexico. Trotsky's heretical sect styles itself the Fourth International, with 5,000 communicants. Until last week, its U.S. congregation was the Socialist Workers' Party, 2,000, which hard-bitten James Patrick Cannon and full-lipped Max Shachtman were co-pastors. Marxism was the ideology of the labor movement, a critical force in the Western world during the 1930s. Labor unions were traditionally run by social democrats, but communists challenged them, pushing an anti-imperialist political line and celebrating the Soviet Union as a homeland of global revolution. Trotskyism emerged as a third pole within organized labor, celebrating the Russian Revolution, but considering it to have been betrayed. Trotsky maintained the USSR was a degenerated workers' state. He called for a political revolution to overturn the parasitical bureaucracy. In the early 1930s, the Communist International focused on opposing the Social Democrats, calling them social fascists, and labeling them the main barrier preventing a revolution. As the Great Depression hit, the communists organized huge protests of unemployed workers and veterans. The hunger marches in the United States, Britain, France, and Germany resulted in millions of desperately poor people coming under communist leadership. In Berlin, the communists launched an uprising in the Wedding district that went on for weeks with armed battles against the police. Trotsky opposed the focus on condemning social democrats, saying that they should be recruited as allies in a united front. His followers joined various social democratic parties in the hopes of making them more revolutionary, a policy similar to what he had pushed years earlier with his August Bloc, now called the French Turn. When Hitler took power in Germany in 1933, Trotsky proclaimed that this was Stalin's fault. If only the German Communist Party and the Social Democratic Party had combined, Hitler could have been blocked, or so the Trotskyite narrative goes. This is absurd, as the German Social Democrats, the party of industrial workers who had murdered Rosa Luxemburg, wanted nothing to do with the Soviet-aligned Communist Party, which recruited heavily among the desperately poor. A river of blood existed between the two organizations going back to 1918. And by 1933, they represented two very different social strata. The idea of them merging into an anti-fascist bloc, as many social democrats and communists clearly would have wanted, was simply impossible. Trotsky spoke of Hitler taking power without a shot fired and condemned the communists of Germany for not taking up arms immediately against the new government. This was also a naive cheap shot, as the communists maintained a very effective underground network throughout the 1930s, rescuing Jews from concentration camps, passing military secrets to the Soviet Union, and otherwise helping pave the way for the Allied victory in the Second World War. A suicidal uprising in response to Hitler taking power by legal means would have led to this all being wiped away. In 1935, the Communist International dramatically shifted tactics and called for forming an alliance with all who opposed fascism. The new line was called the Popular Front and was articulated by Georgy Dimitrov in his remarks to the Seventh World Congress. The understanding was that capitalism was naturally moving toward fascism, and communists could position themselves as the main fighters against it, an essential linchpin in anti-fascist coalitions. This tactical shift resulted in communists having a huge amount of success, as fascism was unpopular even among many in the ruling class. In Britain, the communists organized the Battle of Cable Street to repel Oswald Mosley. In the United States, the Popular Front policies meant supporting Roosevelt, and the Communist Party flourished as part of the New Deal coalition. 1937, the sit-down strike wave resulted in the communist-led Congress of Industrial Organizations breaking away from the AFL and bringing hundreds of thousands of workers into unions that they controlled. Trotsky considered the Popular Front to be a betrayal and said that there was no democratic or fascist bourgeoisie and that it was necessary to form a class line and unite social democrats and labor unionists, but not with any political faction among the capitalists. While this was Trotsky's stated position of class independence, it seemed that in practice, he more and more began to line up with the Axis powers and the capitalists who supported them as he maneuvered against the communists, working to undermine any attempts to build an anti-fascist coalition. The Nazis worked very hard to foment anti-Soviet sentiment among Ukrainians. Many ethnic Germans in Soviet Ukraine, including Mennonite communities that fled to Ukraine following the 1848 revolution, viewed the Soviet government as a continuation of Russian chauvinism. The Nazis fomented Ukrainian nationalism, with Stepan Bandera eventually emerging as the primary Nazi collaborator during the Second World War. Trotsky, interestingly, also embraced Ukrainian nationalism during the late 1930s, calling for an independent Soviet Ukraine and urging his followers to support Ukrainian nationalists and their call to break apart the Soviet Union. When the Spanish Republic battled an insurgency from fascist General Francisco Franco, the communists of the world mobilized international brigades, bringing volunteers from around the world to defend the Republic. Franco famously remarked when looking to seize power in Barcelona that he had 4 columns inside the city and a 5th column, 4 columns outside the city and a 5th column inside. The 5th column Franco referred to was the CNT, an anarcho-syndicalist labor union, and the PUM, the Workers' Party of Marxist Unification, a Trotsky-aligned party in Spain. Both of these groups launched an armed uprising against the Spanish Republic at the same time it was battling Franco in May of 1937. Documents now confirm that both CNT and PUM were receiving covert support from the Germans and Italians, as they organized strikes and disruptions of the war effort against Franco. George Orwell fought with the Trotskyites of PUM and composed his screed Homage to Catalonia, blaming the Soviet Union for Franco's victory and describing the Trotskyite and anarchist uprisings against the Spanish Republic. At the 1937 Moscow trials, Trotsky was convicted in absentia for conspiring with Nikolai Bukharin and Gregory Zinoviev to overthrow Stalin with German and Japanese support. The Moscow trials showed evidence that many found very convincing, including U.S. Ambassador Joseph Davies. Zinoviev and Bukharin confessed to being involved in a conspiracy to carry out a political revolution. Trotsky wrote of carrying out the political revolution Trotsky wrote of and seize power from Stalin. The plan was to hand over a large amount of Soviet territory to the Nazis and put their bloc of rights and Trotskyites in control of the rest of the country. Trotsky maintained his innocence and staged the Dewey Commission in Mexico City, hiring U.S. intellectual John Dewey to preside over it. He ended the event with a speech called "I Stake My Life," claiming that if the commission found he was indeed guilty, he would return to the Soviet Union and be executed. Many critics looked at the Dewey Commission as nothing more than an act of political theater, and Dewey and Trotsky had a nasty falling out shortly afterwards. Dewey denounced Trotsky for allegedly believing that the ends justify the means, and Trotsky thundered back in his book, Their Morals and Ours. In America, the Trotskyites worked in the labor movement to oppose President Roosevelt and the Communist Party's alliance with him on the basis of anti-fascism. The Trotskyites worked within the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, a Republican-aligned labor union that opposed Roosevelt. When the Second World War broke out, the U.S. Socialist Workers' Party was indicted and imprisoned for conspiring to unionize the military and disrupt the war effort. With its leaders in prison, the SWP supported the United Mine Workers of America, led by Republican John L. Lewis, in organizing an illegal strike during the war, forcing the Roosevelt administration to seize the mines in 1943. As Roosevelt grew increasingly close to the Communist Party in the late 1930s, with Eleanor Roosevelt speaking at the National Youth Congress and other communist-led events, Martin Dies formed a congressional committee to investigate, quote, un-American activities. Various communists were called to testify about connections with Roosevelt. Trotsky was invited to appear before the Dies committee to speak on why the, quote, Stalinist government was to be opposed and why Roosevelt's connections with it were a matter of concern. Explaining his decision to speak to an anti-communist congressional hearing, Trotsky wrote, "I was defeated because the working class, as a result of internal and external conditions, showed itself to be too weak to liquidate its own bureaucracy. The struggle against this deception is an elementary political task. A congressional committee is just as suitable in this fight as the workers' press and the national legislative bodies. When the workers understand the reactionary historical role of Stalinism, they will themselves turn away from it with aversion. In order to help the workers, I agreed to appear before the Dies Committee." The Dies Committee ultimately rescinded its invitation, and Trotsky was not given an opportunity to address the U.S. public over the airwaves. However, the newspapers of William Randolph Hearst frequently published his anti-Soviet articles condemning the Communist Party and the Roosevelt administration for being friendly to the Soviet Union. In 1939, the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler. Trotsky argued the pact was carried out in an unprincipled way, but admitted that it was ultimately the correct move. When the Communist Party and the Roosevelt administration were suddenly at loggerheads, Trotsky called on his followers to endorse Earl Browder's 1940 presidential campaign. While Trotsky consistently opposed the Soviet Union and its allies, at the moment when they were tactically softening their anti-fascist stance and criticizing the allies, Trotsky suddenly was willing to embrace them. This sudden shift seems to be pretty solid confirmation of his fascist backing when lined up next to his position on Ukraine and Spain. The only time Trotsky's knee-jerk anti-Sovietism seemed to have cooled was when it matched a similar pivot in the foreign policy of the Nazis. When France was conquered by Hitler, Trotsky condemned the Communist International for trying to build an anti-fascist alliance, writing, "But in line with the general causes of catastrophe inherent in imperialism, it is impermissible to forget the criminal, sinister role played by the Kremlin and the Comintern. Nobody else rendered such support to Hitler as Stalin. Nobody else created such a dangerous situation for the USSR as Stalin. During a period of 5 years, the Kremlin and its Comintern propagandized for an alliance of democracies and a people's front with the aim of preventing war against fascist aggressors. This propaganda, as witnessed most strikingly in France, had a tremendous influence upon the popular masses." He went on to condemn the idea of the Soviet Union aligning with the Western countries against Hitler. Quote, "The agents of the Kremlin begin to speak once more about an alliance of the democracies against fascist aggressors. It is possible that as the cheated cheater, Stalin will be forced to make a new turn in his foreign politics. But woe to the peoples if they are to trust the dishonest agents of the Kremlin. Stalin helped convert Europe into a bloody chaos and took the USSR to the brink of the abyss. The peoples of the USSR now cannot help but feel great anxiety." The same article went on to proclaim that the only way the Soviet people could be safe from German invasion was to overthrow Stalin. Quote, "Only the overthrow of the Moscow totalitarian clique, only the regeneration of Soviet democracy can unleash the forces of the Soviet people for their fight against the inevitable fascist, fast-approaching blow of imperialist Germany. Hence, Soviet patriotism is inseparable from irreconcilable struggle against the Stalinist clique." Not long after writing these words, Trotsky was killed by a KGB agent who infiltrated his household on August 21st, 1940. And that is the end of chapter 1 of my book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. So we continue the story talking about his American followers, then talking about how they broke with Trotsky, etc. So yeah, that's my book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. I'm going to continue reading it on this streams. It's actually sold quite a few. I will say this is one of my top selling books. I think because it was such a big topic with Nick Fuentes and with a lot of these people, it struck a nerve, and I'm glad I wrote it. All right. So why don't we do the roll call, and then I will answer the questions that have come in, and we'll be done then. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? All right. JT24 in Mississippi. Tim in St. Louis. Good to see you. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Peru. Boris in Indianapolis. Las Vegas, Nevada. Good to see you. St. David, Bermuda. Carolyn and Dario in Brooklyn. Robert in New Jersey. Good to see you. You were great in the video, by the way, Robert. Liverpool, United Kingdom. Good to see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Patch in Arizona. Good to see you, Patch. Good to see you. Names and locations. Samuel in the Far East, as always. Good to see you again. Rose for peace. Good to see you, Rose. Yeah, this war is a nightmare. I'll tell you that much. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Anybody else? For some reason, it seems to be not giving me new names, but names and locations. Anybody else? We got somewhere in Helnion. All right. I don't know where Helnion is, but, I hope you're having a good time out there. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Alberta. Oh, someone up there in Canada. Good to see you. Anybody else? Names and locations. I will be taking any more questions that people have. You can send them via Rumble Rants. Oh, you saw my interview on the Liberty Report. Great. Yeah, the audio was a little bit off, but I think the message got across. I'm glad I was able to talk to him. Questions can be sent as Rumble Rants. Best way to do it, though, is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Mop, and that is the best way to send your questions, etc. Jenny Lynn is in Cincinnati. Very, very good. All right, folks. Well, listen, I'm going to start answering people's questions. The first question that came in tonight was from someone who calls themselves someone. They're anonymous. And they said, in my opinion, it seems as if Serbia was the first major liberal war. I think between the genocide propaganda and what was essentially seen by many as the first color revolution, I guess, if you don't count Solidarity or the Velvet Revolution. You also spoke of how you saw coming up people talking about Darfur and Myanmar. What is the Myanmar thing about? Well, the Myanmar thing, okay, so I guess we got to take that question piece by piece. All right, so the first thing, all right, Serbia, right? So what happened, right? Yugoslavia, communist government, but a communist government that broke with the USSR, aligned with the United States in 1948. Tito denounced Stalin in 1948. They were a Marxist government, but they were aligned with the United States. They supported the United States in the Korean War. They didn't fall apart immediately, when the Eastern Bloc countries collapsed. But in the 90s, sections of Yugoslavia started breaking away, and there was a lot of ethnic nationalism. The USA was funding ethnic rivalries, and Serbia was kind of the stronghold. It was the last Marxist, socialist country, and Slobodan Milosevic was the leader of Serbia, and he maintained the Marxist economic system, the socialist system. And Albania had collapsed, and Albania was a largely was about 50% Christian, 50% Muslim, but Muslims from Albania started moving to a region of Serbia to get jobs because they were desperately poor after the fall of communism in Albania. And among them, there was an Islamist insurgency that was created. It was Wahhabis. It was funded by Saudi Arabia. It was called the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA, and they were Islamic extremists and terrorists. I mean, they were Al-Qaeda, basically. And so a civil war broke out, and Serbia is Orthodox Christians. They're Orthodox Christians in Serbia largely, and the Albanians were Wahhabi fanatic Muslims. And there was a region called Kosovo, and the Kosovo Liberation Army, their goal was to break Kosovo away from Yugoslavia. Kosovo is not a country. It never has been, right? Never has anyone considered it that, right? It was always just like a region. It'd be like saying Ohio is a country, right? Ohio's always been part of America. No one's ever considered Ohio. Imagine that a bunch of people from another country, imagine that a bunch of people from Somalia moved to Ohio and then suddenly declared the Ohio Liberation Army and started saying that the Ohioans were oppressed. Well, no, you came there from somewhere else. That's what happened in Kosovo. And it was a war, and there were atrocities on both sides, but the lies, the propaganda about it. Samantha Power was the main propagandist of the war. And there was a famous photo of a very skinny man, and he had barbed wire next to him. And the man was a diseased man, right? And the barbed wire was just a barbed wire fence. He wasn't imprisoned. But they took this photo of a diseased, skinny man next to barbed wire, and that immediately reminded people of the Holocaust. And it was fake. I mean, the man was diseased. He wasn't starved to death, and he wasn't being held behind the barbed wire either. It was a completely fake photo. And the International Action Center that I used to work for, Ramsey Clark, they put out like 5 or 6 very good books, War, Lies, and Videotape, Liar's Poker, that was written by the head of the Workers' Party of Belgium. Ramsey Clark wrote, it was just a media campaign where we have to bomb Serbia because there's a genocide going on. We have to bomb Serbia. And it was propaganda, and it was bullshit. And eventually the bombing set the stage for a color revolution that toppled Milosevic. What's interesting is because that conflict was very much Muslims versus Christians, a lot of the Muslim countries like Iran, Iraq, like Syria, a lot of them supported the KLA. But Russia firmly supported Serbia. And there's kind of, even today, there's like a bond between Serbia and Russia. So yeah, that conflict, it's interesting. The genocide propaganda. I mean, Samantha Power said it was her job to help sell the war. I mean, she wrote her book, The Problem from Hell, Genocide, and she called herself the genocide chick, and she bragged about, oh, I'm the genocide chick. And she cut her teeth on that war as a propagandist. Now, Myanmar, what was Myanmar? Well, Myanmar, when it was a British colony, it was called Burma, right? It was Burma. It was a British colony. It got its independence, and it had like a Bonapartist military regime that was, that took power. And that it was one of these governments that was aligned with the United States, but it's kind of like the Asian tiger countries. It wasn't as successful. It's not considered one of the Asian tigers because they didn't have as much economic growth. But, basically during the Cold War, the United States tolerated various kind of military dictatorships that stabilized and built up living conditions because of the fact that that they needed them as a barrier against communism. You had Park Chung-hee in South Korea. You had the government on Taiwan that was like a military dictatorship, but it built itself up. You had Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. And these were the Asian tiger countries where the USA would trade with them and would support them and they had to stabilize the economy. And Myanmar, you had the military was in power. It was a military government, but they actually called it socialism. They announced the Burmese road to socialism. And they were very anti-communist. It was an authoritarian government. And there were various like communist-led uprisings against the government. But they even called themselves socialists. They were like social democrats. And it was just kind of this, they weren't social democrats really. It was military rule, but there was a lot of, they did implement like some social programs, and they eventually announced the Burmese road to socialism or whatever. But it was a US-backed dictatorship. And and it was aligned with the United States. However, recently, China makes them a better deal. I mean, it's that simple. China makes them a better deal. And China has been trading with Myanmar and, making a better deal. So when I was in college, the CIA staged uprisings in Burma and in Myanmar against the Chinese government. Basically, it was anti-Chinese uprisings in Myanmar against the military government, wanting to bring it down because it was too pro-China. And there was fear that China was going to have military bases in Myanmar, that China, the USA basically wanted to use Myanmar as a base to threaten China. The USA, China has one overseas military base in Djibouti. America has China military bases surrounding China, right? And basically they wanted to use Myanmar to surround China. Here, let me see if I can get you a map. U.S. military bases, right? So, we're told that China is the aggressor. China is the bad guy, right? China is the bad guy. But let me show you this map, right? I'll show you the map, right? This is all the U.S. military bases around China, right? We're told China is somehow being aggressive with their one overseas military base or with their military exercises in the South China Sea. This is all the U.S. military bases surrounding China. Hold on. Goodness gracious. All right. Here we go. Let me put the image on here, right? Just so you can see. Sorry, it's taking a while. All right. What? Why will it not let me show this on the screen? I don't know why. Why will it not let me show this file on the screen? Here, I have the map. Here we go. All right. Yeah, right. So this is all the U.S. military bases around China. All right. Now, this map, it says Burma. It doesn't say Myanmar, but you'll notice there's no U.S. military bases in Myanmar, right? And the military government there is friends with China, right? They have a good relationship. They do a lot of industrial production with Chinese companies or whatever, and the USA has all these bases around there. And the government of Burma, even though it is the military dictatorship, it's the old military regime, it was built by the United States as an anti-communist government. It was an anti-communist military dictatorship in the 70s and 80s. But now China trades with them, and, China gives them a better deal. China, makes a better deal and trades with them. So of course they launched like a Buddhist monk uprising. And of course they have like certain porn that they make that like hippies love. Oh my God, the peaceful Buddhist monks. Oh, they're protesting peacefully. It's just like Gandhi. And the anti-China campaign was aimed at liberals. It's actually kind of interesting. I remember when Obama was running for president in 2008, there was a lot of debates among Republicans, a lot of debates among Democrats. They had many debates that year. And it was clear from watching the debates, Republicans were focused on supporting Israel and hating Iran and hating Muslims. And Democrats were focused on hating China. Now, that's changed a lot, right? Things have changed a whole lot. But that was really one thing I noticed. And so it was liberals. And at my college, there was a professor who was Jewish, but she had converted to Buddhism. And, and she was all out there. Oh, we got to light candles to support the monks of Myanmar. And she was mobilizing people. And I pointed out that this was being done by the United States. I remember I pointed out to her this is being done by the United States and it's against China. And she like lost her mind and started yelling at me. I'm like, my goodness, I could just disagree with you. She was clearly very threatened by that narrative. This is, and she was also very involved in Tibet separatism and all of that. And that this was, the Myanmar thing was just, it was an anti-China. It was the government of Myanmar was getting closer and it is in the Chinese camp. And so the CIA, got all the Buddhist monks and all kinds of people to oppose it. And it seems to have died down. Now there is the issue. Now there's Muslims in Myanmar and there's a whole issue there, but Anyway, I don't know. I could go on about that, but you asked about that. And the Darfur thing is a similar thing too. Sudan has a government, an Islamic government that is anti-imperialist. China hates that government, has broken away South Sudan, which is basically like an Israeli colony, and they would like to break Darfur away from Sudan also, right? And they don't like that Sudan has a government, a very impoverished government that's, I mean, they're fighting for their survival basically, but it's we don't want to glorify and act like Sudan. The conditions there are good, like there's not horrendous human rights violations on both sides of these conflicts. Please don't misunderstand me, but yes, Israel is very, very dedicated to breaking apart Sudan for their own reasons, and they did it already once. They created South Sudan, and and then there's they want to do Darfur as well, and this is where they kind of this is what Samantha Power, her whole background. This is what I talked about in the book that I talked about on the Ron Paul Institute episode, selling war as activism, and using kind of this like, oh, I'm fighting for the downtrodden, and social media videos of dead people, war propaganda, war activism. Like that's kind of what they're about. So, all right. So, yeah, if anyone else has any more questions, the best way to send them is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. There's another question that came in via Buy Me a Coffee from Gavin that Gavin sent in. So I'm going to answer that, but please go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. If you have anything you want me to answer, I'm available to answer those questions. So Gavin said, is there a silver lining to this Holocaust against Iran, and that the Trump administration has blown up the soft power plans of the United States? I mean, I wouldn't call it a silver lining necessarily, but that's a good perspective in that, I mean, the whole Eastern establishment, Obama, etc., it was this long-term strategy. And it looks like Trump wants to get points with Israel very quickly, and he's launched this all-out war, and the ability of the United States to negotiate with any country is going to be decreasing, and the ability of the United States to, sink its influence into these countries is decreasing, and that the United States is looking like a mad bull in a china shop that no one's going to want to work with. And, is that something that we should really want as Americans, though? I mean, I want America to get more tied in with the rising new economy in the East, right? That's what I want, right? I want there to be more American businesses that are doing business with Russia, that are doing business with China. And as a result, we'll be less and less hostile to those countries, and that eventually an anti-monopoly coalition of working class people, small business owners, and others will emerge, and America can pivot out of imperialism, and we can have a government of action that fights for working families. There'll be more division among the ruling class, and there'll be a pro-growth, pro-humanity coalition that will emerge. I guess this changes the rules of the game. I am very worried about the Ukraine conflict. I noticed, for example, that they've lifted a lot of sanctions related to Russian oil and Russian natural gas. That's good. It's good for me. I mean, I'm an RT employee, right? That's good for me. I work at RT. And maybe but how can Russia trust America? How can Russia trust America? Iran was negotiating, and look what they did, right? And it's not, I mean, Venezuela, there's just so many examples of countries that are doing what Russia's doing and sitting down with the United States, and then they get stabbed in the back. And so I don't know. I don't know what the implications are. In terms of soft power, right? This strategy, this like long game that the Eastern establishment plays. Yeah, it's going to be harder. But that said, it's also going to be harder for legit trade and connection between anti-imperialist countries and America to happen as well. So, I mean, I don't know if you're exactly right. I think you're right. You're actually right. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, though. I mean, I can see that it would be harder for them to do like kind of like what they did in Libya. Before the USA bombed and destroyed Libya, Gaddafi was calling Obama his little African son. There was all kinds of American businesses there. Obama arranged for the Lockerbie, the Libyan guy they accused of being the Lockerbie bomber, to be freed and returned home to Libya. And then the whole time they were doing that. And the USA was trying to do that in Belarus. I don't know if you remember this, but before the Ukraine conflict started, the USA, Russia, and Belarus were fighting, right? And Lukashenko, who's now very good with Putin, and Lukashenko and Putin were not getting along, and Belarus and Russia were fighting. And so American media they ran articles about Belarus as an example of socialism actually working, and they acknowledged some of the policies that Belarus has done that's made life better. And the USA was being friendly, but then Belarus had an election, and Lukashenko won because he's wildly popular, but they started that color revolution protest thing, and Lukashenko said, "Oh, I see what's going on." And now Belarus and Russia are tight, and now the war has begun, and Belarus is very solidly on Russia's side. But this is the game that they play, right? Where they try to separate a country from other anti-imperialist countries, and they make them deals. And and part of the reason that Libya was attacked, let's notice, is Libya burned a lot of bridges with anti-imperialists, right? There's a very prominent Shia Muslim cleric that Gaddafi killed. And so Iran and Libya were never really close. I mean, they kind of respected each other as anti-imperialist countries, but they were one of the main Shia Muslim clerics, of Lebanon, who was, a guy who, a lot of the people who started Hezbollah, a lot of the, people who brought Khomeini to power, a lot of the Shia Muslims really respected. No one knows what happened to him, but basically he and Gaddafi were fighting. So Gaddafi invited him to ride on his private jet, and the guy was never heard from again. And there are different theories about what happened to the guy. Some people say Gaddafi's guards killed him there was a miscommunication and Gaddafi's guards killed him. Other people say the guy tried to kill Gaddafi on the plane and there was a fight. Nobody knows what happened, but this very, very prominent Shia cleric who had been criticizing Gaddafi invited him on his plane to work things out, and the guy was never heard from again. And that was pretty devastating. But, Gaddafi was a secular Islamic leader. I mean, he had a secular government. He followed the Quran. He believed in God. But if you read the Green Book, he has a secular government. And there were churches in Libya. And women in the government. It was a secular government. It wasn't an Islamist government. It was a secular Arab nationalist and African nationalist. And, in the 90s, Gaddafi denounced the Arab world. And he said, "I'm now an African leader. I'm not an Arab." He denounced the Palestinian resistance and called it corrupt, which, I'm not saying he's wrong about that. He basically said the Palestinian resistance are corrupt and they don't want a Palestinian state to exist. And he came up with his proposal for a country called Israelistan, and he basically cut his ties with the Palestinian leadership. I mean, he may have had legit criticism of the Palestinians. He didn't have to do that, right? And it was just kind of like, fuck you guys. You guys are getting in the way of your own people. Fuck you. And he walked away from the Palestinian resistance. And Gaddafi pivoted westward, and it was during the Bush administration, really, that Gaddafi, because Bush was fighting al-Qaeda, Gaddafi pivoted towards, aligning with the United States, and he tortured people and stuff. And so Gaddafi is somebody I really, really look up to, and I admire him. And the war in Libya was really awful. But I'm telling you, in the final years, Gaddafi isolated himself from other anti-imperialists, and he didn't have to do that. And that was part of why his country was, if he had had a more close alliance with China, with Russia, with Iran, things wouldn't have gone the way they did. Right. And Russia opposed the U.S. intervention in Libya. Right. All they ever voted for was an arms embargo. Right. That no weapons can be sent into Libya. And the USA used the arms embargo to declare a no-fly zone and to bomb the hell out of Libya with NATO. And that was completely impermissible under the UN Security Council. And Russia said, we didn't vote for that. We did not give we did not give our approval to a U.S. attack on Libya. All we voted for was an arms embargo. And so the USA stretched, we're just enforcing the arms embargo, right? That was the game they played. And so it's not like Russia and China supported the overthrow of Gaddafi. But if Gaddafi had brought in, at the same time he brought in all those American companies when he was getting close to Obama, he should have brought in Chinese companies. He should have brought in Russian companies, right? He should have not just opened up to America. It made him very, very vulnerable. And, America stabbed him in the back. And he should have known they were going to do that. But, Gaddafi isolated himself from the anti-imperialist camp. And I must say, right, this kind of parallels some situations here in America, right? For example, right, the Uhuru movement, the U.S. government came for them, right? So even though we don't share their perspective when it comes to racial matters, right? We don't have their approach, particularly to the race question in America. We supported them because they're under attack, right? That's what you do, right? And that, it's kind of like what I was talking about here, actually a weird, completely different situation with Candace Owens, right? It's like there's this drive to make everybody burn bridges, right? That if somebody who agrees with you is being smeared and defamed and canceled by the people who disagree with you, instead of saying, hey, lay off this person, you celebrate it for your own gain, even though they're on your side. And I see this time and time and time again. PSL celebrated the prosecution of the Uhuru movement, even tried to get their Black is Back march in Washington, D.C. canceled, right? And Uhuru movement is against U.S. aid to Ukraine. PSL, I guess, is neutral and kind of against U.S. aid to Ukraine, though they don't do much about it, right? And they're both pro-Palestine and all of that. And the U.S. government is targeting Uhuru for the same reasons that they might target PSL, right? But PSL saw it as an opportunity for themselves, and the same for some other groups, right? And that this is how they come for all of us, right? If we can't rally and if you cut yourself off, right? This is the game that they play, right? And that this is what they're always trying to do. They're trying to manipulate different anti-imperialist forces against each other. People have to treat each other with respect. They have to treat each other with respect, and they have to understand that real coalitions are based on sharing, right? And people don't get that, right? Everyone wants unity. All the anti-imperialists want unity until that means they have to treat somebody else with respect, right? Unity means follow me, right? And that's what Schiller Institute thinks, right? It's unity. Oh, they want unity until they have to share the stage with CPI. And then all of a sudden they don't want unity anymore, right? And, certain other forces, oh, they want unity until they have to, be polite and not get the spotlight for themselves. Unity means buy their stuff, shop from them, come to their rallies, and just be their background. Fuck that. That's not how it works, right? And CPI, we constantly open the platform for people at different perspectives. We're constantly giving other people a platform, constantly advancing people who disagree with us, right? We endorsed Rage Against the War Machine, which had people that strongly disagree with us about a lot of issues, and we'll platform them and all that. We're trying to build an anti-monopoly coalition. But there's this repeated pattern of, oh yeah, I want unity. And unity means you sit there and nod while I get all the attention for myself, and I get all the money for myself, and I get everything for myself. It's really sad, right? And that if people continue this, the imperialists will come and arrest all of us. They'll come and arrest all of us, and the wars will continue unless people can learn to treat other people with respect. And it's really something that annoys me. And this is why CPI, this is our approach out of the movement to the masses. It's not the only reason, but it's part of it, is that you can't, it's like the people that run the anti-imperialist movements, they've given up, right? Whether it's Schiller Institute or PSL or Workers' World or any of these, they've all given up. They're never actually going to change things. So it's just a matter of who can get the validation, who gets to feel special while we lose, who gets the spotlight and the attention while we lose. Right. And, if that's what you're after, why should you share with anybody? Right. It's not like you're actually going to change anything. It's really sad. It's really, really sad. Right. Why should you share with anybody? Why should you promote other people? Right. Because it's just a matter of who gets the most attention and who gets the most validation. And then this leads to political problems also, because it's not about, you don't expect to actually win. It's not about, actually winning and having a broad coalition. Rather, it's about proving that you're the one who's the most worthy of the attention and validation. So therefore, you want to be the most extreme in your views. You want to be the most pure in your perspective. You want to be as far away from ordinary people as possible to prove that you're the most radical and you're the one who should be on the stage. It's an absolute nightmare. And the libertarian circles have the same problem. The new right and the far right circles have the exact same problem. It's that none of these people think they can win. They don't think they can actually change anything. So it's just a matter of who gets the most likes and shares on social media, who gets to be in the spotlight, who gets to be the center of attention. And that's why they're going to lose. And at this point, you know, it's very hard. We have some people we've been able to work with in the past, and you know, and the other thing is relationships change and global events have changed. You know, I worry about some of our relationships right now. I'll just be honest with you. There are people that we've very successfully worked with in the past that global events maybe moving in a way that we aren't going to be able to work with them as much, and I worry about that because I don't want that to be the case. But at the same time, when people are, I mean, I just don't know. We just have to keep organizing. We have to build CPI, and we have a CPI outreach campaign like in the works that's about to happen. And Gavin, actually, we had a great CPI meeting today. I don't want to get into too much of our internal drama, but Gavin made a really good point, which is, you know, we need to be engaging with people, having one-on-one conversations with people, right? And that we have an outreach campaign, and some of our members didn't quite get it, and that's okay. But basically, we need to be able to engage with people who don't already agree with us, right? And we need to be able to engage with them in a way that we're getting them to think, and that we're showing them things they don't know. And that means approaching them in a very different way than we've been approaching people in the past. You know, and so we're about to do a new outreach campaign, right? That is in the process of being launched. I mean, it's based on kind of the vision I had and everything, you know, and we're about to launch a new outreach campaign. We're not going to people and saying, you already agree with us about blank. We're not doing that. This is something that will take people completely by surprise. And we have to do that, right? And we've got to, it's kind of like what I quote Lenin about, lower and deeper to the real masses. Lower and deeper to the real masses. We have to get to the masses, right? You know, people that are unorganized, people that have never heard this perspective before. That's who we've got to go to. But anyway, if anyone wants to send any more questions, you know, those are two great questions that came in. One was anonymous and one was from Gavin. Any more questions people can send in would be greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. If not, we're going to wrap this stream up because I got church in the morning. You know, so, you know, buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. Check out the episode I did with the Ron Paul Institute. I think it went very, very well. I'll probably post it on this channel like late next week, right? I want to give people a chance to watch it on the Ron Paul Institute channel. You know, and you know, yeah, I mean, I've got actually like some great videos in the docket for this channel this week. I went to gas stations and I interviewed people. I interviewed people today at an anti-war protest that happened in Manhattan. So, you know, I was at that, and I've got video from that today. And so, you know, any more questions that people have would be greatly, greatly appreciated. But yeah, I guess, should I put on some music? All right. Should I put on some music next? What would be a good song to play? What would be something I can do? One thing you know, it hasn't made sense logistically, you know, but one thing I would like to do is do those long videos again, right? And start doing those because I think those are a great thing to do. But yeah, we're going to do the long videos again soon. Yeah. So here, let me figure out a piece of music, but if people want to send their questions, that would be great. All right. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Let me find some music to put on while, you know, I'll give you all one last chance. If anyone wants to send any questions, one last chance. But yeah, let me find some music to put on. And yeah, that'll be your last opportunity. Okay. All right, we'll put on a Canadian communist song called Inevitable Struggle is Breaking Out.
But antagonism will not cease. Only by struggle we advance. Conflict and strife will only but increase our strength and our resolute stance. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. There are two functions that oppressors need, those of the hangman and the priest, to guard and protect their voracious greed. But the struggle against oppression has not ceased. Many times this century we've faced the storms, many times we've heard the cowards' lies, as they vainly try to pervert and deform science into hollow pious cries. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. Great Lenin fought against revisionism, showing to us we must defy all prostitution and base clericalism, and hold up the bright red banner high. The Party of Labor of Albania first recognized Khrushchev's vile aim to fool the people with his megalomania and slander Comrade Stalin's glorious name. Khrushchev's lies have soundly been repudiated, shown to all the world for what they are. Workers of all nations are consolidated against the rise of any puny czar. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. Now if three worlds may engage in speculation to turn us from the path of revolution. But revolution is not just an aspiration, it's a problem that we take up for solution. Many times before we've heard these evil threats, and we have learned our lessons well. Led by the party and with no regrets, we'll send the traitors screaming straight to hell. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. And history's moving at a rapid pace, Marxism's victory burns bright. Red banners proudly streaming in their place show the international proletariat's might. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out. So comrades, arise and let us boldly shout, to revolution's path we will cleave. And now, as always, we cannot greatly grieve, inevitable struggles broken out.
All right. So Gabby sent, a question, but I'm waiting for her question to come through. She cash apped me, but I need, here's the question. It's kind of a super chat, but I talked to my best friend and she's pessimistic about everything going on. I'm glad CPI taught me how to explain the stages under this system, and it comes naturally. This is why I love CPI, because I'm always learning new material on anti-imperialism. Glad we're not another communist group. I love being an innovationist. Well, I do too. And we are on a journey together, and we are learning. And, we have a new outreach campaign coming up, which is going to be very important, because we can't be just going to people and saying, life sucks. Aren't you mad about this thing? I'm mad about it. We can't do that. Right? If we're going to win people over, we have to give them hope, and we have to present them with information that they've never gotten before, and engage them in a way that they've never been engaged before. And we have to learn. I mean, it's a process, right? You learn your politics by preaching it, by engaging with people about it. We have to learn to do outreach. And that was the dream I had the night after Khamenei was killed. And it was a very strange, complicated dream. But the conclusion of it is we must do outreach. We must do outreach. And moved ahead with this pamphlet, this outreach thing, this exciting new outreach vision that I have. And we have to just offer people this. We have something unique to offer people. And we talked about it at the meeting today, and we talked about a lot. And there's house parties coming up, right? If, our members in 3 different cities are having house parties, and that's going to be good. There's a challenge ahead of us leading to the convention this summer. We're going to have our national convention in Chicago. So, we got to just keep organizing. We got to keep organizing. So, I guess thank you, Gabby, for that. I will end the stream for now. But if people have any more questions, feel free to send them in. You don't have to send them in while I'm streaming. You can send them in. I can answer them on the next stream. I'll be back soon. Got to stream. We got to oppose this war, and we got to stand up for anti-imperialism, and we got to build a movement. The only way out of this nightmare is to build a movement. There is no other way. So dare to struggle, dare to win, everybody. Good night. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.